Chapter 23:12. After leaving the profound world, Yi Xian came to Yan clan. Yan clan's patriarch Yan Xiaofan was already waiting in front of the city gate. Seeing Yi Xian, Yan Xiaofan hurriedly came up and cupped his fists. "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian smiled. "Patriarch Yan, I trust you have been well since we last met." Yan Xiaofan smiled. "After not seeing you for a few days, young Master Yi has become stronger." Yi Xian smiled. "Patriarch Yan should know why I came here." Yan Xiaofan nodded. "Young Master Yi, if you want to recruit students, feel free to come. Of course, I also have a small request. I hope that a few people from my Yan clan can join Guanxian Academy." Yi Xian smiled. "Sure. However, I need people with excellent character." Yan Xiaofan said seriously. "Of course, I will personally choose these people." Yi Xian nodded. "Patriarch Yan personally chooses, then I am naturally assured." As he said, he opened his palm, and the Divine Tao Codex appeared in front of Patriarch Yan. Yan Xiaofan was a bit hesitant. Yi Xian smiled. "What is it?" Yan Xiaofan smiled bitterly. "Young Master Yi, my son offended you that day, but thanks to Lord Young Master Ye's magnanimity, and recently, Young Master Yi treated me with such great respect, I have no face." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "What happened in the past is in the past, so let it be in the past. We should look forward, isn't that right? Furthermore, I also accepted 20 million universe veins from you that day, so the grudge between us is settled." Yan Xiaofan bowed deeply. "With young Master Ye's words today, I am truly assured." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Clan leader Yan, hurry up and finish reading this Divine Path Codex. I still have to go to the next place." Yan Xiaofan smiled. "All right." As he said, he took the Divine Tao Codex. After a short moment, he returned the Divine Tao Code to Yi Xian and said with shock, "This Pavilion Master Qin Guan is truly an extraordinary person." Yi Xian nodded. "Only second to my Qing, Yan Xiaofan was stunned. "There's someone stronger than Miss Qin Guan?" Yi Xian smiled. "In terms of knowledge, Qing is also unparalleled. Qing, the eternal god." With that, he turned around and left. Eternal god. Yan Xiaofan was stunned, and then he shook his head and smiled. He looked at Yi Xian who was leaving in the distance, and he sighed with emotion in his heart. No matter if it was bearing or worldly wisdom, this young Master Yi was impeccable. It was true that talented people appeared in every generation, and each generation was stronger than the previous. Yan Xiaofan turned and left. After leaving the profound world, Yi Xian went straight to Yunjie. And this time, no one came to pick him up. Yi Xian came to the foot of Cloud Mountain. This Cloud Mountain was the core of Yunjie, and also the place where Shenlan lived. This mountain could be said to be the forbidden area of Yunjie. Yi Xian had just arrived at the foot of the mountain when an old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. The old man bowed slightly. "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian returned the greeting. "Please inform Realm Lord Shenlan that Yi Xian from Guanxian Academy has come to visit." The old man hesitated for a moment, then said, "I'm really sorry, Realm Lord is in seclusion." Seclusion. Yi Xian looked up, he thought for a moment, then said, "How long will it take?" The old man smiled bitterly. "I don't know." Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, the old man suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, just now Realm Lord passed a message, 2 days later, she will come out of seclusion." Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Then I'll wait." The old man nodded. "All right." Yi Xian pointed to the top of the mountain. "Can I go up?" The old man was a little hesitant. Yi Xian smiled. "Can't you?" The old man thought for a moment, then said, "Young Master Yi, please go ahead." He could see that Shenlan had a good impression of Yi Xian. Since that was the case, why should he poke his nose into other people's business? Yi Xian smiled, then came to the top of Cloud Mountain. The top of the mountain was very cold. At a glance, surrounded by clouds and mist. It was like a fairyland. Yi Xian looked around and seemed to have discovered something. He walked to the right and soon arrived in front of a mountain wall. On the mountain wall, there was a sentence carved, "Who said women were inferior to men?" Seeing this sentence, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Along the way, all the big shots were basically women. There were still 2 days left. Yi Xian lay in front of the mountain wall and took out an ancient book. Chu Ci. It was unknown when this ancient book came from. There were no cultivation methods in the book, just ancient poems written by some scholars. Strictly speaking, this was the earliest collection of romantic poems in the history of literature. Unfortunately, it was already damaged and not complete. Yi Xian felt a little emotional. Along the way, he had experienced many universes, and every universe had its own civilization, but most of these civilizations were martial arts civilizations. In a universe where the strong were respected, the so-called literary civilization was not valued. Moreover, the stronger the power, the less importance it attached to these things. Of course, Yi Xian understood. In the vast universe, without strength, everything was nonsense. Now that he had opened an academy and promoted education, it was also built on the foundation of powerful strength. If he did not have powerful strength, how could he open an academy? That would be a dream. Many times in this world, if you wanted to talk reason with someone, you had to talk with your fists first. At the end of the day, the one with the bigger fist was the one with the bigger reason. Thinking of this, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. While learning, he had to work hard to improve his strength. Recollecting his thoughts, Yi Xian continued to read. As if he had seen something, he said softly, "The world is dirty, but I am pure. Everyone is drunk, but I am sober. Did you write this?" At this moment, a voice came from behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian turned around and saw Shenlan walking towards him slowly. Today, Shenlan was wearing a long, dark green dress. The long dress was embroidered with mountains and rivers. She looked tranquil and elegant. She was still wearing a silver mask on her face. Therefore, only half of her face could be seen. However, even this half of her face was devastatingly beautiful. Yi Xian put away the ancient book in his hand and said with a smile, "It's not." Speaking of this, he seemed to have discovered something, and a touch of surprise flashed in his eyes. Profound insight? He discovered that this Shenlan had reached profound insight. Shenlan looked at Yi Xian. "How did you find out?" Yi Xian smiled and pointed to the pen on his waist. "This thing can see through all concealment methods." Shenlan glanced at the pen on Yi Xian's waist and then asked again, "What pen?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Dadeabi." Shenlan was slightly stunned, and then said, "Are you serious?" Yi Xian asked back, "Have I ever lied to you?" Shenlan suddenly walked slowly in front of Yi Xian. As soon as she approached, Yi Xian suddenly smelled a faint fragrance, which made him a little restless. Shenlan looked straight at Yi Xian. "Dadeabi?" Yi Xian nodded. He took down Dadeabi and then handed it to Shenlan. "Have a look." Shenlan looked at Yi Xian for a moment, and then she took Dadeabi. The moment she held Dadeabi, her pupils suddenly shrank, and she quickly let go. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "You can't hold this pen?" He realized that it was the same for Xiaofan previously. The moment she touched Dadeabi, she let go. Shenlan was extremely shocked, and her voice trembled slightly. "The moment I held this pen, I felt like I was going to be erased." "Erased?" Yi Xian frowned slightly, and he looked at Dadeabi. "Why didn't I feel that?" "Dadeabi?" Shenlan suddenly asked again. "Is this really Dadeabi?" Yi Xian was a little displeased. "Do I get anything out of lying to you?" Shenlan was a little in disbelief. "Why do you have Dadeabi?" Yi Xian blinked. "Should we talk about something else?" After a moment of silence, Shenlan said, "All right." Yi Xian smiled. "I came here this time to talk to you. It's like this, my academy is recruiting people, and I want to come to Yunjia to recruit people. Is that okay? Shenlong glanced at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian smiled, thank you. Shenlong suddenly said, can you do me a favor? Yi Xian nodded, tell me. Shenlong said in a low voice, I want you to accompany me to a place. Yi Xian was a little curious, what place? Shenlong said, Cloud Tomb. Yi Xian's brows furrowed, Cloud Tomb? Shenlong nodded, Yunjia, have a rule for generations. That is, every sector lord who reaches the profound insight realm must go to this Cloud Tomb. I don't know why, but I know that none of my ancestors who went to Yunjia came back. Yi Xian said in a low voice, dangerous? Shenlong nodded, very dangerous. As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian, if you are willing to go with me, there will be benefits. Hearing this, the smile on Yi Xian's face suddenly disappeared, and his expression instantly turned cold, I'm not going. As he finished speaking, he turned and left. Shenlong was slightly stunned. Seeing that Yi Xian had already disappeared into the horizon, she hurriedly disappeared on the spot. At the end of the horizon, Shenlong stood in front of Yi Xian, blocking his path. She looked at Yi Xian, we were having a good talk, why are you angry? Yi Xian's expression was calm, think about it yourself. Shenlong's black brows furrowed. Yi Xian looked at Shenlong, if you can't think about it, then don't think about it. As he finished speaking, he was about to leave. At this time, Shenlong suddenly pulled his right arm, if you don't want to go, you don't have to do this, right? Yi Xian looked at Shenlong, this is what you want? Shenlong stared at Yi Xian, what did I say wrong? Yi Xian smiled, originally, I thought that you and I were friends, but I was wrong. You said you wanted me to help you, and I agreed without any hesitation, but you said you would give me benefits. Let me ask you, did I help you for your benefits? You said benefits, so let me ask you, what benefits can you give me? If we're talking about time veins, I have several divine Tao codex, and each one is worth hundreds of millions of time veins. If we're talking about divine objects, then this brush at my waist is Daebi. Looking at this universe, what divine object can compare to this brush? As he spoke, he walked closer to Shenlong and looked straight into Shenlong's eyes, benefits? Tell me, what benefits can you give me? Shenlong fell silent. Yi Xian said again, I treat you as a friend, but what about you? His words were filled with estrangement. Since that's the case, then I have no need to be friends with you. Goodbye. As he finished speaking, he turned around and was about to leave on his sword. But Shenlong held on to him tightly. Yi Xian turned to look at Shenlong, slightly displeased, what do you want to do? Shenlong hesitated for a moment, then said, I said something wrong. Don't be angry. Yi Xian was expressionless, no sincerity at all. Shenlong looked at Yi Xian, then what do you want? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, my Guanxian Academy has just been established, and now we are lacking people. Do you want to join my Guanxian Academy? There are many benefits. Shenlong. Chapter 23:13. Shenlong gazed at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, are you willing? After a moment of silence, Shenlong said, think about it. Yi Xian nodded slightly. All right. He knew that this matter couldn't be rushed. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly became curious. Miss Shenlong, why are you always wearing a mask? Shenlong said indifferently, it's too beautiful, it's annoying. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he smiled and said, should wear a mask as well. Shenlong frowned slightly. Why? Yi Xian smiled and said, it's too handsome, it's annoying. Shenlong was speechless. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, let's go to the Cloud Tomb. After she finished speaking, she turned around and vanished into the horizon. Yi Xian shrugged and followed her. In the starry sky, Yi Xian was flying on his sword, and Shenlan was by his side. Shenlan glanced at Yi Xian, and then she said, "A swordsman, very rare." Yi Xian blinked. "Handsome?" Shenlan was slightly stunned, and then she said, "You're not serious." Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Shenlan raised her head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. "Young Master Yi, the cloud tomb is very dangerous." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Do you know why I agreed to go with you?" Shenlan turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Because it's dangerous." Shenlan looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian touched his face and said, "Why do you keep looking at me?" Shenlan shook his head. "That mouth of yours is enough to make countless women fall for it." As she said that, she said very seriously, "Young Master Yi, I can feel that you don't have any evil intentions. However, you should pay attention to one thing. If you don't like a woman, don't let her have a good impression of you. Many women are infatuated. To them, once they fall in love, they might give up everything. If they receive a response, then it's fine. But if they don't receive a response, then they might be destroyed." Yi Xian shook his head. "Miss Shenlan, what you said makes sense, but I only treat you as a friend, a very good friend, that's all. If my behavior has caused you to misunderstand, then I will try to be more careful in the future." Shenlan looked at Yi Xian. "I didn't misunderstand." Yi Xian nodded. "That's great." Shenlan frowned. "Am I that bad?" Yi Xian was taken aback. "What do you mean?" Shenlan was expressionless. "I don't mean anything." Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly frowned. He stopped. At the same time, Shenlan also stopped. She turned her head to look, and her eyebrows were slightly knitted. Yi Xian turned his head to look. At the end of the distant starry sky, a figure suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian's expression sank. Just now, someone had been following him and Shenlan. Shenlan looked at Yi Xian. "Your enemy?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "It should be Azura City." Shenlan was a little puzzled. "You have a conflict with them?" Yi Xian nodded. "They want my bloodline." Shenlan sized up Yi Xian. "Your bloodline? What bloodline?" Yi Xian shook his head. Shenlan was slightly stunned, and then he said, "Can't I tell you?" Yi Xian nodded. Shenlan looked at Yi Xian. "Why?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "I treated you sincerely just now, and it caused you to misunderstand. So, it's just as you said, I should pay attention to it. In the future, it's better that I don't tell you some of my secrets, lest you misunderstand." Shenlan was a little angry. "I won't misunderstand." Yi Xian shook his head. "But I still have to watch my words." "Miss Shenlan, don't ask any more." Shenlan looked at Yi Xian and clenched her fists. She was a little angry, but she had no reason to flare up. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and looked into the distance. "Are we about to reach the cloud grave?" Shenlan took a deep breath and said, "I don't know." Yi Xian was speechless. The two of them continued forward. But this time, the two of them didn't talk much. Previously, Yi Xian would take the initiative to talk to Shenlan, but after what had just happened, Yi Xian began to maintain a certain distance from Shenlan. Whether it was in terms of talking or anything else, there was a sense of distance between them. Shenlan's face was as cold as ice, and she didn't say a word. Yi Xian looked around. With Dadeabi's help, his divine sense swept through several dozen starfields, and this time, he didn't discover anyone following them. Yi Xian was silent. His current enemies were the Ancient God and Azura City. Ancient God? Ancient God? Yi Xian shook his head, rejecting this idea. That ancient god shouldn't do such a sneaky thing. It was obvious that it was Azura City. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with coldness. It seemed that after the Cloud Grave, he would have to go to Azura City. He didn't like hidden enemies. If there were enemies, he would naturally get rid of them. Otherwise, why would he keep them around for the new year? Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Shenlan. Shenlan's face was ice-cold, and she didn't say a word. Yi Xian hesitated, but in the end, he didn't say anything. This woman seemed angry, so it was better not to provoke her. He withdrew his gaze and took out the Songs of Chu to continue reading. Shenlan saw Yi Xian pick up the book, and her expression became even colder. About 2 hours later, Shenlan suddenly stopped. Yi Xian hurriedly stopped as well. He looked into the distance. In the depths of the starry sky, there was a cloud and mist. The cloud and mist were dark black, and within the cloud and mist, there was a sinister and eerie feeling. The cloud of mist was very thick, covering at least 1,000,000 miles and spanning the entire starfield. Yi Xian knew that this should be the Cloud Grave. Shenlan looked at the cloud of mist, a trace of solemnity in her eyes. Shenlan said softly, "Let's go." After saying this, she walked towards the Cloud Grave. Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Shenlan's hand and shook his head. "It's a little dangerous." Shenlan glanced at the Dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist. "Did it say that?" Yi Xian nodded. Shenlan said in a low voice, "Is it really Dedeabi?" Yi Xian fell silent. Shenlan glared at Yi Xian. "Didn't you say that you should treat people with sincerity?" Yi Xian hesitated, and then said, "But, everyone has their own secrets, don't they?" Shenlan looked at Yi Xian. "Are you afraid that I will misunderstand and have improper thoughts about you? If so, you can rest assured that I will absolutely not have improper thoughts about you. You can just interact with me normally." Yi Xian was still somewhat hesitant. Shenlan was somewhat angry. "Don't hesitate. Return to normal, I still like the you from before." After saying this, she felt that something was wrong, but she could not take back her words. She could only glare at Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not argue. He looked into the distance, and then said in a low voice, "Two problems. This Cloud Grave is indeed very dangerous. Second, the sword in my hand is indeed Dedeabi." Shenlan said in a low voice, "How dangerous is it?" Yi Xian looked at Shenlan. "Do you really want to go in?" Shenlan nodded. "My father came here in the past, and then never returned." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, and then said, "I'll go in first." After saying this, he turned around and walked towards the Cloud Grave. Shenlan was slightly stunned when she saw this. A moment later, she grabbed Yi Xian's arm. Yi Xian turned to look at Shenlan, and Shenlan stared at Yi Xian. "Let's go in together." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I have Dedeabi. Even if there is danger, it shouldn't be a problem for me to escape unscathed." Shenlan shook her head. "If you want to go in, then we'll go in together. Otherwise, you can go back." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, "Then let's go in together." Shenlan nodded. "All right." As they spoke, the two of them walked towards the Cloud Grave. They just arrived in front of the Cloud Grave when the black clouds and mist suddenly surged. In the next moment, the clouds and mist parted to the sides, and a huge stone staircase appeared before Yi Xian and Shenlan. Yi Xian and Shenlan exchanged glances, and then they walked up the stone staircase. It didn't take long for them to arrive before a vortex. The vortex seemed like a door, and it was extremely gloomy. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. The figure suddenly said in a hoarse voice, "The bloodline of a godly king." As soon as it finished speaking, the bloodline within Shenlan's body suddenly started trembling. In the next moment, a strand of terrifying bloodline energy surged out from within her. Bang! An extremely terrifying bloodline pressure swept out in all directions. However, when this terrifying bloodline pressure came into contact with Yi Xian, it instantly vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, the figure glanced at Yi Xian with a trace of shock in its eyes. Shenlan suddenly said in a deep voice, "You also have the bloodline of a godly king." The figure looked at Shenlan. "Your bloodline has only awakened to 60%, so you don't have the qualifications to return to the clan." Shenlan frowned slightly. "Return to the clan?" The figure was expressionless. "It looks like you don't know. Your ancestor made a mistake in the past and was banished to this universe. Back then, the clan leader said that if your bloodline can awaken to 60% or above, you can return to the clan. Otherwise, you can never return to the clan." Shenlan said in a deep voice, "My father went back?" The figure nodded. Shenlan fell silent. At this moment, the figure suddenly said, "Although your bloodline hasn't awakened to 60% or above, your potential is limitless. I can give you a chance. You can return to the clan." Shenlan looked at the figure with some hesitation. The figure turned sideways. "Go in. Once you enter, you can return to the clan and see your father." Shenlan looked at the black vortex, still hesitating. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "She still has some matters to deal with. Let's come back another day." With that, he directly pulled Shenlan's hand and turned to leave. At this moment, a terrifying pressure directly enveloped the two of them. Yi Xian sighed softly. The figure suddenly said in a hoarse voice, "Young man, smart people often die quickly. However, I'm a little curious. How did you see the problem?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If her father has really returned to the clan, how could he not contact her? Moreover, look at this environment. Does this environment look like a normal environment? Even a fool would know there's a problem. The next time you set up a trap, can you make it more sunny? Make it more festive? Making it so gloomy. Are you trying to be funny? The figure stared at Yi Xian. "Thank you for your reminder. However, you might not be able to leave." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Do you think I'm leaving because I'm afraid of you?" The figure was stunned. Yi Xian grinned. "You've misunderstood. I want to leave, not because I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of myself. I'm afraid that I'll kill more people." The figure chuckled. "Do you know who you're facing?" Yi Xian asked in return. "Do you know who you're facing?" The figure sneered. "Why? You want to compete with me in terms of background? Young man, I'm afraid you can't afford it. Behind me is the Shingu clan. Have you heard of the Shingu clan? You country bumpkin, you definitely haven't heard of it." Yi Xian. P.S. Writing is indeed not that simple. I can only be brothers with everyone on the 15th of every month. Chapter 23:14. Competing for backing? Yi Xian was speechless. How did he end up talking about backing? Was he the kind of person who would compete for backing? Until today, had he ever relied on anyone? Thinking of this, Yi Xian's old face suddenly turned red. The phantom suddenly sneered and said, "Have you ever heard of the ancient gods?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Ancient gods?" The phantom's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. "You have actually heard of the ancient gods. It seems that your backing is not as weak as I thought." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Can we talk about backing all the time? I don't think this is good." The phantom sneered, "What's bad about it? Don't you know that backing is also a kind of strength?" Yi Xian, the phantom said again, "The ancient gods are just one of them, and the ancient gods, in terms of godhood, are even above the ancient gods." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "You so-called gods, are they all conferred by others, or by yourselves?" The phantom sneered, "You really are a frog at the bottom of a well, asking such an ignorant question, you? Yi Xian suddenly waved his pen. The tip of the pen slashed out. In the distance, the phantom's pupils suddenly shrank, and his heart was filled with horror. There was no time to think, his right hand suddenly punched out. Boom! The tip of the pen directly passed through the phantom and slashed on the teleportation vortex. Boom! The vortex was erased in an instant, and at the same time, all the clouds and mist within nearly 1,000,000 miles disappeared directly, and the starry sky reappeared. Seeing this scene, Shenlan was directly stunned. At this moment, she completely believed that the pen in Yi Xian's hand was Dedeabi. Before, although she wanted to believe in Yi Xian, her reason told her that it should not be Dedeabi. It should be known that this Dedeabi could run the fate of all living beings. How could it be hung on Yi Xian's waist? But at this moment, she really believed it. That brush tip just now was enough to kill countless Grotto Profound Realm powerhouses. Only the legendary Dedeabi could have such terrifying power. Outrageous! Shenlan looked at Yi Xian in front of her, and she was so shocked that her chest kept heaving up and down. In front of Yi Xian, the gradually disappearing figure looked at Yi Xian in a daze. You. Didn't we have a good chat? Why did you have to kill him? Don't you think this is a little too much? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were so weak. He was somewhat speechless. Once Dedeabi came out, he would be reduced to ashes. Initially, he wanted to stop there and heavily injure the phantom. Then, he could put on a show or something. However, he didn't expect the other party to be so weak. A single brush stroke was enough to instantly kill it. Yi Xian looked at Dedeabi in his hand. Did he underestimate this Dedeabi a little? Dedeabi, at this time, the phantom in the distance suddenly said in a trembling voice, What should I do now? Yi Xian was silent. What to do? I killed you, and you're asking me what to do? Yi Xian thought about it, and then said, Why don't I bury you? Shenlan, the phantom said in a trembling voice, My words just now were indeed somewhat disrespectful, but it's not a crime worthy of death, right? Can you let me off? I promise I'll change my attitude when I speak. Yi Xian hesitated, and then said, It might be too late. In that instant just now, Dedeabi completely erased all the vitality of the phantom. Guilt? He naturally did not. What a joke. If his strength was weak, then the one who died would be him. At that time, would the other party feel guilty for killing him? Of course not. The phantom suddenly turned his head, and when he saw that the portal was gone, his expression instantly changed, and then he turned to look at Yi Xian, and said in a trembling voice, Do me a favor. I want to send a voice transmission back to my Xingu clan, and ask them not to provoke you. Can you do me a favor? Yi Xian nodded, yes. The phantom looked up into the depths of the starry sky, and opened his palm. A special voice transmission talisman appeared in his hand, and he said in a trembling voice, I've lost all my strength, and I can no longer send voice transmission. Repeat after me, do not avenge me. Yi Xian nodded, do not avenge me, boom. Yi Xian's voice directly entered the voice transmission talisman, and the next moment, the voice transmission talisman turned into a red light and soared into the sky. The phantom hurriedly said again, this person. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared completely. Yi Xian was stunned. Gone? At this moment, the starry sky above Yi Xian and Shenlan suddenly split open, and then, an illusory middle-aged man appeared above them. The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian, you killed someone, and still say such words. You are so vicious. Yi Xian's expression froze. The phantom stared at Yi Xian, you wait, no matter who you are, you killed a member of my Xingu clan, no matter how far away you are, you will be killed. After saying that, he directly disappeared. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, and then turned to look at Shenlan. Did he misunderstand? Did he think that I just said those words after I killed someone? Shenlong nodded. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, if I explain, will he believe me? Shenlong shook his head. Yi Xian sighed softly. This was a big misunderstanding. Shenlong suddenly said softly, I'm sorry. Yi Xian looked at Shenlong, what are you apologizing for? Shenlong said softly, I've brought you trouble. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, what trouble is this? Let's go. After saying that, he turned and left. Shenlong glanced at Yi Xian, and then turned and left. After leaving the cloud grave, Yi Xian turned to look at Shenlong, and said with a smile, I'm going back to the academy. What about you? Shenlong thought for a moment, and then said, replying to Yunjie. Yi Xian nodded, take care. After saying that, he directly flew up on his sword, and in the blink of an eye, disappeared at the end of the horizon, without a trace of reluctance. Shenlong looked at the distant horizon, and after a moment, seeing that Yi Xian had no intention of turning back, she coldly snorted, turned and left. After returning to the academy, Yi Xian directly went to the bamboo forest that he often cultivated in. Vigilance. The appearance of the middle-aged man made him feel a sense of danger. Whether it was the ancient god or the voice of the ancients, these forces were definitely not simple. Although he had Dedeabi, it didn't mean that he was invincible. After all, he couldn't activate Dedeabi infinitely. Every time he activated Dedeabi, it consumed a lot of energy. Once he was consumed infinitely, it would be very dangerous for him. And now, although the overall strength of the Guanxian Academy had improved a lot, it was definitely unable to compete with the ancient gods and the Xingu clan. Moreover, these forces seemed to have become smarter. If they really wanted to target him, they might start with the academy. At that time, he couldn't escape, and he would immediately fall into a passive position. Would he have to look for the Qing, and the Yang clan again? Thinking of this, Yi Xian shook his head. This time, he wanted to rely on himself. Once something happened, it would be Qing, and the Yang clan. How could he grow? He had to act on his own to feel comfortable. With the appearance of the Qing, and the Yang clan, they would be able to act on their own. He could only watch, this wasn't a good feeling. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the Xiantian token appeared in his hand. He activated it, and soon, a woman appeared in front of him. It was Yu, the current vice president of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Seeing Yi Xian, Yu immediately bowed deeply, young Master Yi. Yi Xian nodded, no need to be so polite. Yu looked at Yi Xian and smiled, young Master Yi, do you have any instructions? Yi Xian said in a low voice, can you grasp all the intelligence of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion? Yu hesitated, then shook his head, I can only grasp the intelligence of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion in the universe of gods. As for other places, I and the president of the Qing kingdom have no authority to mobilize. Yi Xian asked again, then can you help me investigate the ancient gods and the Xingu clan? Yu was silent for a moment, then shook his head, never. There was silence. It seemed that to know about the ancient gods and the Xingu clan, he could only go to a higher-level Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked at Yu, then do you know about other Celestial Treasure Pavilions? Higher level than the universe of gods. Yu thought for a moment, then shook his head, I don't know. The Celestial Treasure Pavilions in each cosmos basically do their own thing. Only the Pavilion Master knows the exact location of all the Celestial Treasure Pavilions. Also, only she can mobilize all the branch presidents. Otherwise, the branches under us will not care about each other. Yi Xian furrowed his brows slightly. Each of us? Yu nodded. Yi Xian was silent. If anything happened to this Qing Guan, the Celestial Treasure Pavilion would instantly fall apart. However, with this Qing Guan's terrifying wealth, who would dare to let anything happen to her? It could be said that if the 3 swords were not used, even if the Yang clan used all their strength, they might not be able to kill Qin Guan. This woman, those terrifying trump cards, he still felt his heart palpitate when he thought about it. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Ah Yu. You can leave. Ah Yu bowed deeply, then turned and disappeared. Yi Xian suddenly said, Xiaofan. Xiaofan appeared in front of Yi Xian with a scimitar. Yi Xian looked at Xiaofan. How long until you reach the see-through realm? Xiaofan said in a low voice, if you have the money, immediately. Yi Xian asked, how much? Xiaofan raised a finger, and Yi Xian immediately bent his finger, and a storage ring floated in front of Xiaofan. There was exactly 1 million in the storage ring. Xiaofan hesitated, then said, 5 million. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Sister, 5 million for a finger, is it appropriate? Xiaofan hurriedly raised 5 fingers. Yi Xian was speechless. He took out another storage ring and placed it in front of Xiaofan. There was 4 million in the storage ring. Xiaofan hesitated, then said, I still need 5 million, I need 6 million. Yi Xian suddenly stood up. He glared at Xiaofan. It doesn't matter whether the money is money or not, can you say it all at once? Is this fun? Xiaofan lowered her head slightly. It's too much. I don't dare to take it. Yi Xian stared at Xiaofan. Then why do you dare to take it now? Xiaofan hesitated, then said, I didn't know you were so rich. Yi Xian. Chapter 23:15. Yi Xian was completely speechless. He withdrew another spatial ring and passed it to Xiaofan. There's no mistake this time, right? Xiaofan hurriedly took the spatial ring and said, no, no. Yi Xian nodded. Cultivate here. Quiet. Xiaofan nodded, and then she sat down cross-legged. In the next moment, she started to madly absorb the universe veins that Yi Xian gave her. Yi Xian was slightly shocked as he gazed at Xiaofan. Because he noticed that Xiaofan's aura was rising explosively. It was obvious that the girl in front of him lacked money. If she had money, then she would have attained the Grotto realm a long time ago. If Xiaofan attained the Grotto realm, then her combat strength would probably far exceed Grotto profounders of the same realm. After all, Xiaofan was already able to kill Grotto profounders before attaining the Grotto realm. So if she attained the Grotto realm, then how terrifying would her combat strength be? The incident between the Xingu clan and the ancient god realm allowed him to understand that he had to foster a group of top-rate experts. Before he possessed absolute strength, it was better to gang up on them. Of course, money was the most important when it came to fostering experts. He noticed that many people possessed great natural talent and strength, but they couldn't improve because they didn't have money. If they had money, then many people would be able to rise to a higher level. Looks like I have to think of a way to get money. Right at this moment, footsteps resounded from the side. Yi Xian turned around and saw that it was Yan Bei. Yan Bei wore a violet dress today, and her long hair fluttered in the wind. Moreover, the veil on her face had vanished a long time ago. She was still so drop-dead gorgeous. Yi Xian couldn't help but sigh in his heart as he gazed at Yan Bei. Why do I like beautiful young women? Could it be that I'm really lustful? Meanwhile, Yan Bei glanced at Xiaofan, who sat cross-legged on the ground, and said, she wants to attain the Grotto realm? Yi Xian nodded. Yan Bei gazed at Yi Xian. I want to charge into the Grotto realm as well. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, you lack money? Yan Bei nodded. Yi Xian smiled, how much? Yan Bei raised a finger. Yi Xian had a slight headache, 5 million. Yan Bei nodded. Yi Xian was a bit speechless. He didn't waste words. He opened his palm and a spatial ring flew in front of Yan Bei. Within the spatial ring were 6 million universe veins. Yan Bei blinked. Why 1 million more? Yi Xian said indifferently, there's no other reason. I'm rich and willful. Yan Bei was slightly stunned. The next moment, she covered her mouth and chuckled. I have to say, you're really handsome when you're generous. It's so charming. Yi Xian was speechless. Yan Bei suddenly said seriously, I will not become a vase by your side. With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, I have someone I like. Yan Bei stopped in her tracks and turned around to look at Yi Xian. Are you rejecting me? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, I mean, can I like two people at the same time? With that, he turned and ran. On the spot, Yan Bei stared blankly for a moment before saying, Tui, how shameless. Oh my God. Because Yi Xian had established a connection with the various major forces in the universe of gods, Guanxian Academy began to recruit students from all over the universe of gods, and the number of people in Guanxian Academy increased. Now, there were more than 800 people. And Yi Xian also began to pay attention to Wuyuan. He was very clear that if Guanxian Academy wanted to grow and establish itself for the universe, it must first have powerful martial strength. Only with powerful martial strength could it deter the small fry. Otherwise, who would give a damn about you? In this universe, strength was still respected. His previous thinking was wrong. Previously, he thought that the academy wouldn't dominate the universe. Now, he felt that if he wanted to change the universe, he had to dominate it first. Only by becoming the boss of this world could he change the rules and the current situation. Of course, he also understood that once Wuyuan became too strong, the one institution might be weak in the future. It might even be suppressed and there would be internal strife. This problem gave him a headache. There was no good solution because suppressing one party would weaken the other party. It didn't matter whether it was valuing literature over martial strength or valuing martial strength over literature. Fortunately, he was still here, so this problem wouldn't appear for the time being. As for the future, it could only be solved in the future. The most important thing now was to strengthen Guanxian Academy. During this time, Yi Xian was pondering over his sword Dao. The sword Dao of the human world. His sword Dao of the human world only had a foundation of belief and hadn't developed substantially yet. However, he wasn't in a hurry. He had to take it slow. No one's sword Dao could be achieved overnight. Yi Xian didn't choose to meditate and comprehend in the academy. He wanted to cultivate the sword Dao of the human world, so he had to go to the secular world to comprehend it. If he didn't enter the secular world, how could he comprehend it? Somewhere in the city, Yi Xian walked slowly. He didn't know what city this was. He just wandered aimlessly until he reached this place. On the street, Yi Xian looked around calmly. People came and went on the street. But none of them were angry. Everyone was in a hurry as they walked. Moreover, they were wary of their surroundings. The culture of martial arts here was extremely advanced. The people on the street weren't weak. Most of the businesses were selling weapons and secret manuals. There were almost no businesses that sold food. What was missing? Soon, Yi Xian realized that there was something missing in the secular world. As far as the eye could see, all the cultivators were rushing about for their future. Once they embarked on the path of martial arts, there was no turning back. If they wanted to live longer, live better, they could only continue to cultivate, and cultivate madly. And cultivation required money. In the face of survival, most of the time, the so-called morality and bottom line were worthless. This world was too impetuous. Yi Xian suddenly stopped and frowned. What right did he have to stand on the high ground and criticize the people on the street who were fighting for their lives? In all fairness, if he didn't have his father and Qing, could he have made it to where he was today? Hard work? He admitted that he had worked hard. However, without his father and Qing, or support, could he have made it to where he was today with his own hard work? That was obviously impossible. Did cultivating the heart in the secular world make him stand on the high ground and criticize the people of the world? Why were the people on the street in a hurry? For the Tao, for longevity, and for survival. What was wrong with these people working hard for survival? The reason why he wasn't like them was because he had a powerful father and a powerful sister. Along the way, had he ever lacked money? No. He never had to worry about money. Did he ever lack cultivation methods and martial arts techniques? No. Along the way, he had never lacked cultivation methods, martial techniques, or divine abilities. Just like his current strongest sword technique, the Void/Sword. He obtained it effortlessly. But what about these people in front of him? They didn't have an invincible father or an invincible Qing. If they didn't work hard, could they change their fate? Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly at the thought. Sword Tao of the human world? He realized that he was wrong from the beginning. He always stood on the high ground and looked down at the mortal world. He thought he was miserable when he came from Qing City, but he didn't know that compared to countless people, he wasn't miserable at all. When you complain that you don't have shoes to wear, you have to remember that there are people in this world who don't have feet. The mortal world wasn't about detachment, it was about blending in and feeling it. If he looked down from above, how could he truly cultivate the heart in the secular world? At this point, Yi Xian suddenly sat on the ground and smiled. Happy. Happy. He was happy that he found his shortcomings and flaws in his state of mind. He was glad that he didn't lose his mind and walk on a crooked path. Boom! All of a sudden, the sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled slightly. Yi Xian picked up the sword and slowly walked to the end of the street. At this moment, he felt like he had returned to the Qing city. The Qing city was a small world, and it was this small world that had the atmosphere of the mortal world. On both sides of the Qing city streets, there were endless shouts. The streets were filled with the atmosphere of a marketplace. Scenes from the past in Qing City flashed through his mind like a bolt of lightning. Tuoba Yen, Jiangjiu, Ji Anji, Lian Wanli, Mo Yunqi, Tuoba Little Demon. After walking for an unknown period of time, Yi Xian arrived at the never-ending star domain. Here, he saw some old acquaintances, Endless Heaven, Master Painter, Buried Sky Great Wall, and Mo Xia. After a long time, he arrived at the chaotic universe. Here, he saw Shao Qi, Shengguan Xian. After a long time, he arrived at the fifth dimension. Here, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly because he saw Sister Nian. Sister Nian who loved eating fish. The smile on Yi Xian's face gradually brightened. After a long time, Yi Xian arrived at the spirit realm. Here, he saw Guan Yin, Jiu, Amu, Guan Yin, Situ. On the street, Yi Xian walked slower and slower. After a long time, Yi Xian arrived at the sixth dimension. Here, he saw the ancient temple's abbot, the demon clan's Xiao Dao, the Yi clan's prophet, Dao Ting, the white-robed divine general, the Dao ancestor, Rahu, King Ah Ku, King Scarlet Demon, Xiao Dao. When Yi Xian saw this person, he stopped. After a long time of silence, he slowly clenched his left hand and continued forward. The ninth dimension. Here, he saw the immortal emperor clan's Dongli Jing. More and more people came. Dao Yi, Ah Ming, Disaster, Little Knife, and Lianyun. The ninth floor, Jian Zizai, the second floor, the Demon Master, the Emperor Dog, Xiao Ling. As he walked, the smile on Yi Xian's face gradually turned into reluctance. But soon, the reluctance turned into a complicated expression. Along the way, countless people quietly disappeared. At this time, Yi Xian had already walked out of the city. At this time, it was already late at night. A bright moon hung in the sky. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes slowly. His eyes were full of vicissitudes. After a long time, Yi Xian said softly, "The bright moon is still there, but I don't see my old friend." As he said this, he shook his head and took a step forward. Cherish the moment. Boom! A terrifying sword intent suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. In an instant, the surrounding space directly twisted. The sword intent became stronger and stronger. In the end, it pierced through the sky and went straight into the depths of the galaxy. Rumble. Suddenly, the star field within millions of miles boiled, but it was not destroyed. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, a mysterious special power accompanied his sword intent and filled the surroundings. Human World Sword Intent. Human World Force. Human World Sword Principle Elementary. P.S. Reading can't be accomplished in one step, it has to be done slowly. Just like in love, no matter what purpose you have, there has to be a process first. After going through this process, there will be feelings, and with feelings, everything will come naturally. It is the same when reading a book. If you read the first chapter, then you want to read the end. What is the point? Only by slowly watching the process would it be meaningful. Readers say that they want to read a few hundred chapters at once, but they don't know that you are killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. Killing a chicken can immediately get the egg, but what about in the future? Raising a chicken well and eating its eggs every day, that was the long-term solution. The same goes for reading. 2 chapters a day, no more, no less. Slowly enjoy the process. This process is the Tao. If I understand it, do you understand it? Finally, don't forget to vote. Reading and voting is also one of the Tao. Chapter 23:16. Mortal World Refining Heart. Walking from inside the city to outside the city was only a few miles away, but Yi Xian felt like he had experienced several reincarnations. During this time, he saw countless old friends. These old friends evoked countless memories in him. Some were beautiful, some were reluctant, and some were regretful because they had parted before they could properly bid farewell. In a person's life, there were many times when the people around them would disappear. Looking back on the past, he realized that there were many regrets. Many times, parting was unavoidable, but one should at least properly bid farewell. Thinking of this, Yi Xian faintly smiled because it was not too late. Around Yi Xian, the Mortal World Sword Intent and Mortal World Force became stronger and stronger. Mortal World Sword Intent. Mortal World Force. This was a brand new sword Tao that he had created. It was only at the initial stage because he had just comprehended his own mortal world. Along the way, he had created his own mortal world. Although it was only at the initial stage, it was still a true sword Tao. Yi Xian opened his palm. The surrounding sword intent slowly returned to his body, and the mortal world force also gradually disappeared. At this time, the space-time around Yi Xian suddenly distorted. Yi Xian frowned. Soon, the space-time around Yi Xian blurred. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in an unknown starry sky. Not far in front of him stood a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man wore a black and red robe, and his body emitted a terrifying evil aura and killing intent. See-through realm. And behind him on both sides, there were 6 people. All of them were see-through realm. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. You must be Azura City Lord. The middle-aged man was expressionless. I am. This person was Desolate Cosmos Azura City Lord. Yi Xian smiled. How long have you been planning to kill me? Azura City Lord looked at Yi Xian. I especially hate people like you. You are clearly panicking, but you still pretend to be calm. Although life is like a play, don't you feel tired pretending? Yi Xian frowned. Do you think I'm pretending? Azura City's City Lord sneered. 7 Grotto Profound Realms, don't tell me you are not afraid. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and said, to be honest, I really am not afraid. The Azura City Lord sneered. Keep acting. Keep acting. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, Azura City Lord said, Youngster, I know your background is not simple, Yi Xian suddenly interrupted Azura City Lord's words. You know, but you still want to target me, right? Azura City Lord looked at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian shook his head. Actually, I'm not a person who likes to talk nonsense, but I want to say a few more words today. I really don't understand. Why are you doing this? Don't I look like an expert? Azura City Lord sized up Yi Xian and mocked, you're just a puny grotto profound realm, and you're also considered an expert? Yi Xian thought about it and then turned his head to look at that grotto profound realm powerhouse on the right. That grotto profound realm powerhouse frowned. What are you looking at? You. Chi. Suddenly, the head of that grotto profound realm powerhouse who spoke flew out. Fresh blood splattered several feet high. Directly erased. Slashing void. In the field, everyone was stunned. The Azura City Lord in the lead looked at Yi Xian with a face full of terror. You. How can you? Just a look. Impossible, Yi Xian smiled faintly. Do I look like an expert now? Azura City Lord's eyes flashed with a hint of malevolence. Absolutely impossible. Everyone attack together. He will definitely. However, before he finished speaking, those 5 grotto profound realm powerhouses around Yi Xian suddenly turned around and disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. Escaped. Yi Xian and Azura City Lord were both stunned. Escaped? Azura City Lord was somewhat dumbfounded. In the depths of the starry sky, those few grotto profound realm powerhouses broke out in cold sweat. One look instantly killed a grotto profound realm. What kind of horrifying strength did this require? Still fight? What was the City Lord thinking? Yi Xian looked at Azura City Lord and said with a smile, it's just us left. Azura City Lord looked at Yi Xian, his eyes full of dread. Who the hell are you? Yi Xian thought about it and then said, don't talk nonsense. Next, I'm going to attack you. This sword of mine is soundless and extremely strange. You have to be on guard with all your might, understand? The reason why he was able to kill that grotto profound realm just now was because of a sneak attack, catching the other party off guard. And now, he wanted to give it a shot, whether or not an honorable sword could kill a grotto profound realm. One had to know, sneak attack this sort of thing could only happen once. The second time, the other party would definitely be on guard. Azura City Lord hesitated for a moment and then said, can I refuse? Yi Xian was just about to speak when Azura City Lord suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. In the next moment, a terrifying killing intent and viciousness suddenly surged out from his body, and then he punched at Yi Xian. This punch was simply monstrous viciousness. Under normal circumstances, an ordinary powerhouse's mind would be affected by this viciousness. However, Yi Xian seemed to be completely fine. Seeing Yi Xian's gaze was calm and not affected in the slightest, Azura City Lord's pupils suddenly constricted. At this moment, he panicked in his heart. Bang! An expanse of sword light suddenly erupted in front of Yi Xian. In the next moment, Azura City Lord was directly sent flying. This time, he flew for several tens of thousands of meters, and he had just stopped when his body completely shattered and his soul vanished. Killed. Azura City Lord looked at Yi Xian with a slightly dazed expression. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a medicinal pill slowly floated over to Azura City Lord. This is a soul-nurturing pill. Quickly consume it or you'll be gone. When he sensed his soul vanishing swiftly, Azura City Lord hurriedly consumed the soul-nurturing pill. As soon as he consumed it, a mysterious force instantly protected his soul. Azura City Lord instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this, and then he looked at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, "Thank you." Yi Xian grinned. "You're welcome." As he spoke, he pointed forward, and a strand of sword light directly locked onto Azura City Lord's soul. In the next moment, Chen Shi and Azura City Lord vanished on the spot. It wasn't long before Yi Xian arrived at Azura City with Azura City Lord. Yi Xian frowned slightly when he arrived at Azura City. Azura City was filled with endless viciousness and killing intent. The density of the killing intent and viciousness shocked him. At that moment, Azura City Lord suddenly asked in a trembling voice, "Why did you bring me here?" Yi Xian earnestly said, "Azura City Lord, I won't hide it from you. I've recently opened an academy to nurture experts, so I'm short on money. Your Azura City has been passed down for so many years, so you must have many time veins, right?" Azura City Lord's expression stiffened. He now knew why the man in front of him hadn't killed him. It was because he wanted money. Azura City Lord hastily asked, "How much does young Master Yi want?" Yi Xian raised a finger. The Azura City Lord relaxed. 10 million. Young Master Yi, please wait a moment. I'll immediately have someone send it over. You. Yi Xian suddenly earnestly said, "Azura City Lord, it's not 10 million, it's 100 million. Azura City Lord's face was filled with disbelief. 100 million? Yi Xian nodded. Azura City Lord immediately shook his head. Young Master Yi, that's too much. Even if I sell Azura City, it won't be that much. Chi. A sword suddenly pierced through Azura City Lord's forehead. Boom. Azura City Lord's soul started disappearing bit by bit. Azura City Lord's expression changed. He looked at Yi Xian and said in shock, "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian smiled. 100 million, your life, and the lives of Azura City. Which do you choose? Azura City Lord said in a trembling voice, "Young Master Yi, you can't do this. You are a scholar. How can a scholar do this kind of thing?" Yi Xian's expression was calm. "Do you know what they called me before I was a scholar?" Azura City Lord said in a trembling voice, "What did they call you?" Yi Xian smiled. "I won't tell you." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly flicked his sleeve, and a sword suddenly appeared in the sky above Azura City. After that, a terrifying strand of sword intent enveloped the entire Azura City. At that moment, countless experts in Azura City raised their heads. When they saw the city lord of Azura City in the sky, all the experts of Azura City were stunned. Yi Xian looked at Azura City Lord and said, 100 million, is there a problem? Azura City Lord quickly said, No, I'll raise it immediately. But, after I raise 100 million, can you let me go? Yi Xian nodded. Sure. Azura City Lord was somewhat doubtful. Yi Xian said seriously, I swear on my father that if you raise 100 million, I won't kill you. Azura City Lord nodded. Good. I believe in young Master Ye's character. After saying that, he turned to Azura City and roared, Sell everything that can be sold. Pack them up for Celestial Treasure Pavilion at a low price. Hurry. Below, Azura City's experts didn't dare to hesitate. They brought divine items and cultivation methods to Celestial Treasure Pavilion. In the sky, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. About an hour later, an old man arrived in front of Yi Xian and Azura City Lord. The old man said with a trembling voice, Young Master Yi, there are 60 million time veins here. We are still lacking 40 million. Yi Xian frowned. Seeing this, Azura City Lord quickly said, Young Master Yi, don't be anxious. I still have more. Young Master Yi, please wait a moment. After saying that, he turned and disappeared. Yi Xian wasn't afraid of him escaping. His sword was still locked onto his soul. Soon, Azura City Lord arrived in front of Yi Xian and handed a spatial ring to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, Yi Xian looked at Azura City Lord and said with a smile, You are really interesting. You didn't bring so many time veins with you. The reason he hadn't killed Azura City Lord was because he noticed that Azura City Lord didn't have a spatial ring. Azura City Lord smiled embarrassedly, they are the family's wealth. If something unexpected happens, Yi Xian grinned, you've thought it through. As he spoke, he put the spatial ring away. Azura City Lord's heart was bleeding when he saw Yi Xian put the spatial ring away. He had saved this for over 10,000 years. Now, it was all gone. Of course, his life was more important. Azura City Lord hesitated for a moment and said, Young Master Yi, you will keep your word, right? Yi Xian nodded, of course. After saying that, he took Azura City Lord and vanished on the spot. Before long, they appeared in Guanxian Academy. Azura City Lord looked at Yi Xian and was slightly puzzled, Young Master Yi, why did you bring me here? Yi Xian grinned, to see an old friend. Azura City Lord was about to speak when he suddenly turned his head. A woman was staring at him from not far away. This woman was Xiaofan. Seeing Xiaofan, Azura City Lord's expression changed drastically. Yi Xian looked at Xiaofan, I'll leave him to you. Do as you please. After saying that, he turned and left. Azura City Lord suddenly roared, Yi Xian, you promised me that you wouldn't kill me. Yi Xian stopped, I didn't want to kill you. Azura City Lord looked at Yi Xian with hatred, you are playing with words. You swore on your father's name. Aren't you afraid that your father will die a horrible death? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I'm not afraid. The green-clothed man. Chapter 23:17. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the Azura City Lord was dumbfounded. Yi Xian didn't waste any more words and disappeared into the distance. The Azura City Lord suddenly felt a chill on his back. He turned around. Yi Xian returned to the bamboo forest where he cultivated. He sat down cross-legged and slowly closed his eyes. 100 million. Now, he had 100 million universe veins. Adding the remaining universe veins, he had close to 120 million universe veins. The problem of money was temporarily solved. Next, he had to nurture more see-through realm experts. Nurturing them wasn't enough. He had to recruit some top experts. Nurturing from zero to see-through realm was too difficult. After all, not everyone was a Qingqiu. Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He opened his palm, and the sword his father had gifted him appeared in his hand. Just now, when he fought with the Azura City Lord, he discovered that he now had the strength to instantly kill a see-through realm expert. And he hadn't used his full strength in that sword strike. Because he hadn't used his bloodline power, mortal sword intent, and mortal power. If he used his full strength, Yi Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. He couldn't estimate it because he had only seen two experts above see-through realm. One was the ancient god, and the other was the Shingu clan's phantom. That phantom had been killed by Dedeabi, so he didn't know how strong the other was. At this time, Xiaofan walked in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Xiaofan. It's settled? Xiaofan nodded. Yi Xian nodded slightly. That's good. Xiaofan looked at Yi Xian. From today onwards, my life is yours. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, go back and take over Azura City, and then recruit extremely talented students there. Saying that, he opened his palm, and a spatial ring floated in front of Xiaofan. Inside the spatial ring, there were 10 million universe veins. Xiaofan nodded. Okay. Saying that, she put away the spatial ring. Yi Xian said, when it's time to fight, I'll call you back. Remember, study the divine path code well. Xiaofan nodded. All right. With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian looked at the sword in his hand, a little worried. Right now, he wanted to fight to his heart's content. However, ordinary see-through realm was not his opponent. Powerhouses above see-through realm were also not his opponent. The Xingu clan. Yi Xian furrowed his brows. Why hadn't the Xingu clan come looking for trouble with him yet? And that ancient god? Was he joking when he said those harsh words? Yi Xian naturally wouldn't take the initiative to look for them. Although he was confident now, he wasn't so confident that he thought he was invincible. If the other party came later, he would have more time to develop. That was good. However, he really wanted to fight now. Now, he felt a little like big brother Xiaoyao Zi, Qing'er, and his father. He was invincible in the gods' world. This feeling of being invincible really made one feel lonely. The loneliness of being invincible. Thinking of this, Yi Xian was shocked. In the past, whenever he had this kind of thought, he would immediately be beaten up. That was to say, he wouldn't be handsome for more than 3 days. Damn it, am I going to be arranged? Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The old man bowed deeply. "Young Master Yi, please help me." This person was the old man who followed Shenlong previously. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What's the matter?" The old man said solemnly. "The Xingu clan is here." Xingu clan. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. The old man bowed again. "Please come with me to Yunjia, young Master Yi." Yi Xian nodded. He got up and disappeared from the spot with the old man. Yunjia. At the peak of Cloudy Mountain, Shenlong looked at a woman sitting not far away. The woman was dressed in a loose white robe. The robe was spotless, and there was a drop of strange vermilion between her eyebrows. Shenlong looked at the woman in front of him with an extremely solemn expression. At this moment, the woman suddenly said, "Come with me to the clan tomorrow." There was no room for doubt. Shenlong said solemnly, "Who are you?" The woman glanced at Shenlong. Just as she was about to speak, a man suddenly appeared in front of her. The person who came was Yi Xian. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Profound awareness realm. As she spoke, her gaze fell on the brush at Yi Xian's waist. Her expression was calm. "You used this brush to kill Gu Qian that day." Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The woman picked up the teacup on the stone table and took a sip. Then she said, "Dedeabi, but this is not the real body." Hearing this, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He was shocked. Who was this woman? She actually recognized Dedeabi and knew that this was not Dedeabi. Yi Xian suddenly asked in his heart, "Brother Brush, you don't seem to be that cool." Dedeabi was speechless. Yi Xian was silent. He was a little wary. It was obvious that he had been living too comfortably recently. Therefore, he was being arranged again. Could it be Dedeabi's arrangement? Thinking of this, Yi Xian frowned. At this moment, Dedeabi suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, don't blame me for not being able to control your fate. If I was that capable, I wouldn't be threatened by your sister every day. Also, this woman is still like an aunt to me. But the current you can't unleash the full power of my clone. What I mean is, you should find the reason from yourself." Yi Xian was speechless. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Special bloodline and Dedeabi. Even I am a little curious about your identity. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "You're from the Xingu clan?" The woman nodded. Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Do you want a civil one or a martial one?" The woman looked calm. "I don't care. You choose." Yi Xian thought for a while. Then he said, "Let's get a literary one then." The woman nodded. "Sure." Yi Xian smiled. "How should I address you, miss?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "You don't mind if I speak the truth, right?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course." The woman's expression was calm. "You don't deserve to know my name." Yi Xian's expression froze. The woman continued. I don't mean to offend you. But the current you really don't have the right to know my name. If you think I've offended you, you can use force. As she said that, she pointed at the Dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist. You can hit me with that. Yi Xian smiled. Miss, you're so arrogant. The woman shook her head. It's not that I'm arrogant. It's just that you don't have enough power. That's why you think I'm arrogant. I know that you can't unleash the full power of this weapon at your current level. To be honest, I really suggest that you use force first. Otherwise, you'll have the illusion that you can talk to me on equal terms. Yi Xian nodded. Shall we go somewhere else? The woman shook her head. No need. Just attack. I guarantee that not a single blade of grass or tree will be damaged. Yi Xian was silent. Oh no. I've met a tough opponent. I can't pretend anymore. The woman suddenly stood up. She leaned forward and looked down at Yi Xian. Do you want to fight? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. As he said that, he opened his palm. Dedeabi appeared in his hand. The next moment, Dedeabi slowly flew to the side. The woman looked at Yi Xian. You don't need Dedeabi? Yi Xian nodded. No need. The woman looked straight at Yi Xian. Then you have no chance of winning. Yi Xian asked. What if I use Dedeabi? The woman said, 30% chance of winning. Yi Xian smiled. Miss, please enlighten me. As he said that, a sword pierced towards the woman's temple like a ghost. Void slashing. When the sword was half an inch away from the woman's temple, it suddenly stopped. 2 fingers had clamped down on the tip of the sword. The woman's pure white fingers had clamped down on Yi Xian's sword just like that. Moreover, all the energy within the sword had actually been suppressed to the point it couldn't leak out at all. Yi Xian's expression turned solemn when he witnessed this scene. My sword strike, void slashing, was actually resisted just like that? That wasn't the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that she'd actually suppressed all the energy within the sword strike. How terrifying must one's strength be in order to accomplish that? Right at this moment, the woman suddenly grabbed the sword in a reverse grip and pressed it against Yi Xian's neck. It's a good sword, and the sword technique is a good technique as well. Unfortunately, you're too weak. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly passed the sword over to Yi Xian. Do it again. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, there's probably a gap between us. The woman's expression remained calm. Are we not going to continue? Yi Xian said, one more time. As soon as he finished speaking, he took the sword that the woman passed to him. In the next moment, the sword vanished. It was still void slashing. But this time, it was imbued with the sword intent and energy of the world. However, the sword was still clamped down by the woman's fingers. However, a strand of blood slowly seeped out from between her fingers. Her fingers had been pierced. The woman's beautiful brows knit together slightly while a wisp of surprise flashed through her eyes. Your sword Dao has some skill. However, Yi Xian's expression dimmed down. Damn it. I can't stay cool for more than 3 days. Even with Dedeabi's blessing, it still wouldn't be enough. He'd intended to show off in the universe of gods for a while longer, but he hadn't expected that the slap would come so soon. Life. What a sin. The woman suddenly said, what's the name of your sword Dao? Yi Xian replied, the sword Dao of the world. The woman spoke in a light voice. The sword Dao of the world isn't bad. You use the matters of the world as your sword. Unfortunately, you're too inexperienced, and you've only attained initial success in your sword Dao. However, this sword Dao has boundless potential. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Are you going to beat me to death? The woman looked at Yi Xian. Are you going to use the people behind you to threaten me? Yi Xian shook his head. My skills aren't as good as yours. I admit defeat. The woman nodded slightly in admiration. You're indeed not bad. You admit defeat so calmly. You're not like other youngsters who, once they lose, would either be stubborn or use their supporters. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman returned the sword to Yi Xian. I won't kill you. However, you have to come with me. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Where to? The woman replied, the Xingu clan. As soon as she finished speaking, she flicked her right sleeve. Boom! The distant horizon directly exploded, and a huge vortex appeared. Yi Xian hesitated for a while before saying, all right. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. I thought you would refuse. Yi Xian said, if you lose, you should act like you've lost. The woman sized up Yi Xian. No one in the younger generation of the Xingu clan can compare to you. I'll tell you the truth. I want you to go to the Xingu clan because I want you to represent the Xingu clan in the tournament. If you win, the grudge between you and the Xingu clan will be written off. Yi Xian asked, what if I lose? The woman was expressionless. You'll be beaten to death by others. As she spoke, she leaned over to look at Yi Xian. Don't worry. If you're beaten to death, I'll avenge you with the people behind you. Yi Xian shook his head. That won't be necessary. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If I'm beaten to death, this endless universe will be buried with me. As he spoke, he looked around and said softly, let me say something that might be a little pretentious. The endless universe still exists because I, Yi Xian, am still alive. The woman looked at Yi Xian. After a while, she shook her head. You're delusional. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. A lot of people have asked me when I'll broadcast. I'll say that I'll broadcast when I explode. I feel that if I do that, you guys will be friendlier to me. Chapter 23:18. Qing. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of Qing again. He could feel that Qing was lonely. She might be even more lonely than his elder brother and the unfettered one. Moreover, Qing's temper was even more irascible than his father and the unfettered one. If there was no one in this world that she loved, she might really destroy the entire universe. If she were to act recklessly, even his father and elder brother would not be able to stop her. No one could stop her from acting recklessly. Sigh. Yi Xian suddenly wanted to meet Qing. The woman in front of Yi Xian was looking at him. When she heard Yi Xian's words, her expression remained calm because she did not think much of it. The woman suddenly said, let's go. Then she turned to look at Shenlan. Shall we return to the clan? Shenlan glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. All right. The woman was about to lead Yi Xian and Shenlan away when a woman suddenly appeared in front of them. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the woman. The person that arrived was actually Qing Qiu. Yi Xian frowned. Qing Qiu, why are you here? Qing Qiu said in a low voice, I'm worried about you, brother young lord. Yi Xian shook his head. I'm fine. You can go back. Qing Qiu looked at the woman. Brother young lord, does she want to take you away? Yi Xian nodded. I'm ashamed. I can't beat her. Qing Qiu looked at the woman. Let's fight. Yi Xian was stunned. The woman sized up Qing Qiu with interest, and then she said, all right. Qing Qiu suddenly punched. Her punch was filled with righteousness. The woman in the distance narrowed her eyes and punched. Rumble. Suddenly, a terrifying force erupted in front of the two women. In the next moment, Qing Qiu was pushed back 30 kilometers, but the woman was pushed back over 10 kilometers as well. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. What the hell? Am I really trash? In the distance, Qing Qiu slowly clenched her right hand behind her. She stood straight and looked at the woman in the distance, her eyes as calm as water. On the other side, the woman glanced at her cracked hand and then looked at Qing Qiu. Apart from shock, there was also a hint of excitement in her eyes. What a terrifying punch! Little girl, are you willing to take me as your master? Yi Xian was speechless. Qing Qiu glanced at the woman and said, I only have young master in my heart. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, then shook her head, he is also not bad, but he is not as outstanding as you. Yi Xian's face darkened. Qing Qiu chuckled. Young master's aspiration is not something you can understand. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Young master, you can rest assured. The academy has me, so nothing will go wrong. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he opened his palm, and a spatial ring floated over to Qing Qiu. There are 60 million universe veins in this spatial ring. You can make use of them yourself. Qing Qiu remained silent for a moment, and then she nodded slightly. All right. As soon as she finished speaking, she put the spatial ring away. Yi Xian looked at the woman. Let's go. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly said, Little girl, do you know what it means if you're willing to take me as your master? Qing Qiu glanced at the woman. I'll be invincible in the universe if I follow you. I'll be invincible if I follow young master. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. The woman frowned slightly. Yi Xian felt slightly embarrassed. This little girl, Qing Qiu, is simply blindly confident in me. Looks like I have to work harder. Only then can I be worthy of her trust. At this moment, the woman turned to look at Yi Xian. Do you know how outstanding she is? Yi Xian said seriously, she's about the same as me. The woman was slightly taken aback, and then she said, your skin is so thick that I'm shocked. Yi Xian, at this moment, Shenlan suddenly said, he's outstanding to begin with. The woman glanced at Shenlan, and then looked at Yi Xian. I didn't say that you're not outstanding, but that little girl is even more outstanding. Yi Xian smiled. Miss, it doesn't seem meaningful for us to discuss this here. Let's go to the Xingu clan. The woman nodded. All right. As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yi Xian and Shenlan into the teleportation whirlpool. In the next moment, the three of them started to teleport. The woman clasped her hands behind her back, and her back was facing Yi Xian and Shenlan. Yi Xian turned to look at Shenlan. Why did you come? Shenlan's face was expressionless. Why do you ask? Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, the woman suddenly said, I have to say, I'm really curious that you're able to make Dedeabi follow you. As she spoke, she turned to look at Yi Xian. How did you do it? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, personal charm. Dedeabi, the woman frowned. I have to admit that you're indeed outstanding, but I don't think you're outstanding enough to make Dedeabi follow you. Yi Xian's expression was calm, and he did not speak. The woman said again, no matter what, you're indeed very mysterious. If you can win this competition for my Xingu clan, the grudge between you and my Xingu clan will be written off. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and did not speak again. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and said in his heart, Brother Bai, who is the reincarnation of Qing Qiu? Dedeabi did not respond. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Do you not want to say it, or do you not dare to say it? Dedeabi still did not respond. Yi Xian was speechless. He had to say that he was even more curious about Qing Qiu. This lass was not simple at all. In front of her, all the geniuses and monsters he had seen were trash, including himself. At this moment, the woman suddenly said, We're here. As soon as she said that, a white light suddenly appeared in front of the three of them, and the next moment, the three of them directly disappeared into the white light. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes, and what he saw was a floating city. These cities were incomparably huge, like giant beasts standing in the clouds. At a glance, there were at least a few hundred of them. In addition to that, not far in front of the three of them, there was a huge statue of a man. This man's statue was nearly 1,000 feet tall, standing between heaven and earth. He looked forward, and his eyes exuded an invisible aura that made people feel intimidated. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Shingu clan? The woman in the lead nodded. Yes. Suddenly, Shenlong said softly, there are many familiar auras. The woman turned to look at Shenlong. That's the aura of the bloodline. You have the God King's bloodline of the Shingu clan, but it's a pity that you've only awakened 60% of it. 70% is a threshold, and if you can awaken 70% of it, your strength will have a qualitative leap. Shenlong said in a deep voice, was my father killed by you? The woman said, he should have been killed by Gu Qian. Shenlong's face darkened. The woman glanced at Shenlong. Your ancestors' bloodline committed a grave mistake and should have been annihilated, but back then, the clan leader was merciful and let him off. As she said that, she shook her head slightly. There's no meaning in saying all this now. Shenlong wanted to say something, but Yi Xian stopped him. Shenlong looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian smiled slightly. When you're powerless, don't argue with them. There's no meaning in arguing with them. After a moment of silence, Shenlong nodded. The woman turned to look at Yi Xian. Your heart is as clear as a mirror. Yi Xian smiled slightly. I'm curious about something. Are there many experts at your level? The woman shook her head. There are only a few in this universe. Yi Xian asked again, what universe is this? The woman glanced at Yi Xian. The God universe. In this universe, there were 6 ancient gods, and 2 of them were primeval gods. As she said that, she suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. Do you think that these so-called gods are stronger people? Yi Xian nodded. The woman shook her head. You're wrong. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The woman said again, to some people, they are gods. What I said just now, only those who are stronger than these gods are qualified to say it. Yi Xian was silent. Indeed. Based on the current situation, his strength should be no match for these so-called gods. Qing'er was qualified to say that, but it did not mean that he was. But there was no other way. After following Qing'er for a while, he realized that everyone was like an ant to him. Thinking of this, he thought of Xiao Ta. This Xiao Ta had been by Qing'er's side for so long that he probably did not care about anyone anymore. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of the woman. The old man bowed deeply to the woman. Clan leader. Clan leader. Hearing the old man's words, Yi Xian was stunned. This woman is the Shingu clan leader? The woman glanced at Yi Xian and said, he is representing the Shingu clan to fight the Imperial Wilderness Celestial clan. Hearing this, the old man was stunned. The next moment, he hurriedly said, clan leader, that Gu Xian, The woman frowned slightly. Seeing this, the old man was shocked. He hurriedly bowed deeply and did not dare to speak again. The woman did not speak again and was about to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, the Imperial Wilderness Celestial clan is very strong, right? The woman stopped and nodded. Yi Xian said seriously, this martial arts competition is very important to the Shingu clan, right? The woman turned to look at Yi Xian. What are you trying to say? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, the opponent is very strong, and this martial arts competition is very important to you. Shouldn't you improve my strength? Shenlong, after a moment of silence, the woman said, if you use Daebi, you are almost invincible below demigods. You can even fight ordinary demigods. Yi Xian shook his head. This Daebi can only be used twice a year, and this year, I have already used it twice. The woman frowned slightly. Twice? Yi Xian nodded slightly. That's right. This Daebi is not ordinary, and my strength is weak, so I can only use it twice a year. Saying that, he smiled and took out an ancient book. I have been studying the books of sages since I was young, and I have never lied. The woman glanced at Yi Xian. I believe you. Yi Xian nodded with a calm expression. But in his heart, he felt a little emotional. Damn it! He was not suitable to walk the path of sincerity and truth. During this period of time, no one believed him when he spoke the truth. And when he lied, others actually believed him. F***ck. What kind of world was this? Yi Xian sighed in his heart. Since ancient times, no one believed in true love, only tricks could win people's hearts. Chapter 23:19. Shingu Clan. The woman brought Yi Xian to a martial arts practice field. This practice field was nearly 10,000 feet long and wide, and there was no one around. The woman turned to look at Yi Xian. You are now in the divine profound realm, right? Yi Xian nodded. The woman nodded slightly. You need to reach the profound opening realm. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. Do you know the mystery of the profound opening realm? Yi Xian shook his head. Actually, he knew that with Daebi, he could reach any realm, and naturally, he could reach the profound opening realm. However, he still wanted this woman to explain in detail. Maybe there would be a different harvest. Previously, the reason why he did not use Daebi to directly reach the profound opening realm was because his intuition told him that even if he used Daebi to reach the profound opening realm, he would not be able to do anything to this woman. Moreover, once he used Daebi to increase his realm, the consumption was too terrifying. It could be said that when he used Daebi to increase his realm, it was the time to play with his life. But now, it was not the time to play with his life yet. He could wait and see for now. The woman said, Sit. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. The woman also sat down, and then said, Profound opening is the Tao of seeing through fate. As her voice fell, she gently waved her right hand, and suddenly, strange red lines appeared all around. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Fate lines. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Fate lines. The woman nodded. These are the fate lines of all living beings. Yi Xian asked, Can it be changed? The woman nodded, Yes. Yi Xian frowned slightly, Yes. The woman nodded slightly. However, it can only change life and death. As she said that, she opened her palm, and a flower appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian. This flower, if no one interferes, it will continue to grow, but if I make a move, it will wither and disappear now. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, Then how do you know that when you kill it, that's the fate it deserves? A hint of admiration flashed in the woman's eyes. You are indeed very outstanding. You are right. Perhaps the fate that I changed its fate is the fate that it originally should have. And this involves another level. In other words, demigod realm. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Above profound insight is demigod, and above demigod is ancient god? The woman nodded. Yi Xian was a little curious. What realm are you in now? The woman said, Demigod. Demigod. Yi Xian was silent. Was he a little too arrogant when he was facing the statue of the ancient god? Meanwhile, the woman continued, as the name implies, the grotto profundity allows the tracks of destiny to become material. Most importantly, you can cultivate your own energy of destiny. As she spoke, she opened her palm and a surge of power suddenly appeared in her hand. This is the power of destiny. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, does controlling my own energy of destiny mean that I can control my own destiny? The woman shook her head. No. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. Why? The woman glanced at Yi Xian. Because someone is stronger than you. The strong can decide the fate of the weak. Understand? Yi Xian came to a complete understanding when he heard this. Destiny. It was none other than the strong who were respected. The strong could decide the fate of others. Just like Qing, With a single thought, she could decide the fate of all the living beings in the universe. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly stood up and said, "Contact me if you need anything. The competition is in a month from now. So, you only have a month." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, "It won't take that long." The woman turned around to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's aura suddenly rose explosively, and he instantly rose from the profound insight realm to the grotto profundity realm. The woman was slightly taken aback when she saw this. She took a deep look. She took a deep look at Yi Xian before turning around and leaving. Yi Xian glanced at the woman in the distance and frowned slightly. Isn't this woman shocked? I can't even act cool now. He withdrew his thoughts and started to seriously sense the grotto profundity realm. On the other side, the woman was looking down at Yi Xian from a tower. At this moment, an old man walked slowly behind the woman. The old man bowed slightly, and then he looked down at Yi Xian and said in a low voice, "Patriarch, why didn't you kill him?" The woman shook her head slightly. "Killing him would bring disaster to our clan." The old man's pupils constricted when he heard this. How could that be possible? The woman looked down at Yi Xian, and a trace of complicated emotions flashed through her eyes. How could an ordinary person get to Daebi to follow him? The old man said in a low voice, "I have mobilized all the intelligence to investigate this person, and I have obtained two useful pieces of information. First, this person is the young master of the Yang clan. Second, this person is a super VIP of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, and he is the only super VIP. According to our investigation, this person knows Pavilion Master Qin Guan. As for how they met, we don't know. As for the Yang clan." Speaking of this, he shook his head slightly. There is no news at all. The woman looked down at Yi Xian, and her expression was calm. There is no news at all, so there are two possibilities. First, this Yang clan doesn't exist at all. Second, this Yang clan is in an unknown universe, and their martial arts civilization far surpasses ours. Saying this, she slowly closed her eyes. The second possibility. Hearing this, the old man's expression was extremely solemn. This. How is this possible? Patriarch, the universe we are in now is almost certain to be the universe with the highest civilization in the known universe. How could there be a universe with a higher civilization? The woman glanced at the old man. You are too narrow-minded. The old man was speechless. The woman looked down at Yi Xian, and her expression was complicated. Because she had gone out and seen the vastness of the outside world, she had never thought that the Xingu clan was very powerful. The old man hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Patriarch, if he really is from a universe with a higher civilization, then why did you bring him back? The woman's expression was calm. Let him compete with that person from the Imperial Wilderness Divine Clan. If he wins, it would naturally be great, but if he loses, he will die at the hands of the Imperial Wilderness Divine Clan. At that time, the forces behind him will definitely come into conflict with the Imperial Wilderness Divine Clan. At that time, my Xingu clan will be able to reap the benefits. The old man bowed slightly and said in admiration, This plan is brilliant. The woman said, During this month, whatever he needs, we can satisfy him. Saying this, she turned around and left. The old man glanced down at Yi Xian, and he fell silent. On the square, Yi Xian had already recovered from the see-through realm to the profound understanding realm. Yi Xian couldn't help but sigh. This Dedeabi was really a bit of a cheat. After he used Dedeabi's great Tao to reach the see-through realm, he first familiarized himself with the see-through realm, and then he controlled his own power of destiny. When he recovered to the profound understanding realm, he could easily reach the see-through realm without relying on Dedeabi. However, the demand on the universe veins was too great. From the profound understanding realm to the see-through realm, he spent a total of 30 million universe veins. 30 million. Even he felt his heart ache. And he was also a bit on the verge of collapse. Why did it take him so much to go from the profound understanding realm to the see-through realm? And Xiaofan and the others only needed 5 or 6 million universe veins? Could it be because he was too fast? One had to know that Xiaofan and the others had been at the divine perception realm for a long time, and he had just reached the divine perception realm not long ago. No matter what, he had to think of a way to get money now. Moreover, after reaching the see-through realm, it didn't mean that he was really at the see-through realm. After all, he relied on Dedeabi to advance, so he needed to settle down and consolidate his realm. And now, Yi Xian was consolidating his realm. And consolidating his realm also required the consumption of universe veins. Seeing that the universe veins in his storage ring were decreasing, he began to worry. He had to think of a way to earn more universe veins. Besides consolidating his realm, he was also constantly cultivating his sword Tao. And the cultivation of the sword Tao was not as easy as cultivating his realm. The cultivation of the sword Tao was the cultivation of the heart, the settlement of the heart, the breakthrough of the heart, and this was definitely not something that could be achieved by meditating and comprehending. It couldn't be rushed. Yi Xian was also trying hard to slow down and not be impatient. Cultivation knew no time, and day after day passed. On this day, Yi Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes. Not far in front of him, stood a young man. The young man was wearing a tight black robe, and he had an imposing appearance. There was a sense of majesty between his brows. Yi Xian asked, "What's the matter?" The young man's expression was calm. "Let's spar." Yi Xian shook his head. The young man frowned slightly. "So cowardly?" Hearing this, Yi Xian also frowned. "You really want to fight?" The young man was expressionless. "How can it be fake?" Yi Xian nodded. "Let's make a bet, it'll be more interesting." "What do you think?" The young man looked at Yi Xian. "Okay. Tell me, how do you want to bet?" Yi Xian opened his palm, and a storage ring appeared in his hand. "I have all my universe veins, and I still have 30 million. I'll bet 30 million universe veins." Hearing this, the young man was stunned. 30 million universe veins? The young man's expression suddenly became somewhat ugly. How could he take out 30 million universe veins? In the entire Shingu clan, probably only the clan leader could take out 30 million universe veins. Damn! Is this guy so generous? Yi Xian suddenly said, "Can't afford to play?" The young man glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian spoke indifferently, "If you're poor, then don't come out and fight." As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. The young man fell silent for a moment before he said, "I don't have that many universe veins. Let's play smaller." Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at the young man. "How many do you have?" The young man hesitated for a moment and said, 3 million. Yi Xian was furious. "You only have 3 million, yet you dare to challenge me? Are you trying to insult me?" The young man was speechless. Yi Xian said, "That's too little. I won't fight." The young man said angrily, "It's just a spar. Is there a need for you to do this?" Yi Xian's expression was calm. "Isn't sparring a waste of time? Perhaps time is nothing to you, but it's extremely precious to me." The young man was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "How about this? You go and gather 10 million universe veins. The young man gazed at Yi Xian. Are you that confident? Yi Xian replied with a question. Are you that lacking in confidence? The young man gazed at Yi Xian for a short while before he said, just you wait. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. It didn't take long for the young man to return. He opened his palm, and a spatial ring appeared in his hand. There were exactly 10 million universe veins within the spatial ring. At this moment, there were many Xingu clan experts in the surroundings. Some were from the older generation, and some were from the younger generation. There were a few hundred of them. The young man gazed at Yi Xian. Can we fight now? Yi Xian shook his head. The young man frowned slightly. What do you want to do now? Yi Xian smiled. Wait. As he spoke, he suddenly took out a table and said, everyone, I'm going to fight your Xingu clan geniuses. Are you interested in making a bet? If you bet that I'll win, the odds will be 1-2. If you bet that your Xingu clan geniuses will win, the odds will be 1-10. As he spoke, he said seriously, this is a good opportunity to get rich. All of you must seize this opportunity. Everyone. Chapter 23:20. When they heard Yi Xian, the expressions of all the experts of the Xingu clan became unsightly. Of course, most of them were furious. If Yi Xian won, the odds would be 1-2. If the young man won, the odds would be 1-10. He was looking down on the Xingu clan. The young man who stood before Yi Xian spoke indifferently, is there anyone who wants to play? If you want, you can play. This person before us is extremely generous. The experts of the Xingu clan started to place their bets when they heard him. All of them were betting on the young man. It wasn't long before the bets had reached 10 million universe veins. All of them were betting on the young man. He was the most monstrous genius of the Xingu clan, so they naturally had to give him face. Moreover, they didn't like Yi Xian. What right did an outsider have to show off in the Xingu clan? Yi Xian was speechless when he saw this. Is this a large clan? These young men and old fellows only managed to gather 10 million universe veins. Aren't they too poor? Qin Guan's rich woman is better. She's beautiful and has a lot of money. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts and turned to look at the young man. Can we begin? The young man nodded, yes. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian and chuckled, are you really that confident? So, as he spoke, a strand of sword light suddenly appeared before his forehead. Void slash. The young man's pupils constricted. This was truly too unexpected. He practically instinctively raised his arms to block. Bang! The young man was pushed 300 m back, and his body instantly shattered as soon as he stopped moving. Then, a sword was suddenly pressed against the center of his forehead. The surroundings suddenly became deathly silent. He lost? He lost just like that? 2 swords? One to shatter his body and the other to crush his soul. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yi Xian put away all the spatial rings on the table, and then he gazed at the young man. You've lost. As he spoke, he opened his palm and the young man's storage ring slowly floated into his hand. A total of 20 million universe veins. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth lifted slightly. Now, he had 50 million universe veins, which could temporarily solve his urgent problems. In the distance, the young man suddenly roared, you sneak attacked me. A sneak attack. The experts of the Xingu clan roared furiously as well. Surprise attack. Yi Xian smiled. Bro, did I ask you, can we start, before I made my move? The young man's expression was somewhat unsightly. Yi Xian smiled and said, and how did you answer me? The answer you gave me was yes. Since it's possible, is there a problem with me making a move? The young man, shameless. At this moment, a woman suddenly stood out from the side. She looked very young, around 20 years of age. She wore a long green dress and had exquisite facial features. She was a beauty, and at this moment, she was glaring angrily at Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the woman. "How am I shameless?" The woman said angrily, "Just now, Big Brother Gu Xian was talking to you, and you attacked him. If this isn't a sneak attack, then what is?" Yi Xian asked, "Didn't I ask him if we can begin?" The woman said angrily, "But he was talking at that time." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "The competition has already begun, and you still talk nonsense. Isn't such behavior retarded?" The woman glared at Yi Xian. "But he was talking at that time. Holy F***ck. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. "Are you crazy?" The woman glared at Yi Xian. "You're shameless. That's a sneak attack." Yi Xian shook his head. "Sister, according to my temper in the past, people like you should die 100 times. With that, he turned and left. In the arena, the Xingu clan experts did not give up. They were still scolding Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned around and looked at the Xingu clan experts. "Since you're not satisfied, then let's fight again. Who's next? Who's next?" The arena suddenly fell silent. Although Yi Xian had launched a sneak attack just now, his strength was there for all to see. If he did not have strength, then no matter how he launched a sneak attack, it would be useless. At this moment, the woman from before suddenly shouted angrily, "You sneak attack, you!" Yi Xian suddenly disappeared from the spot. Smack! Under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian directly slapped the woman's face. Pfft! In an instant, all the teeth in the woman's mouth were spat out along with a stream of blood. At the same time, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed the woman's throat and slammed her to the ground. Boom! The ground cracked, and the woman's head was embedded into the ground. Yi Xian stepped on the woman's body with his right foot, his expression calm. "I've given you face, but you chose not to. Since you don't cherish it, then there's no need for me to be polite with you." With that, he suddenly stepped on the woman's face with his right foot. Boom! In an instant, the woman's face was directly smashed, and it was extremely bloody. Impudent! At this moment, an angry roar suddenly sounded from afar. Yi Xian looked into the distance, and there, a man in black was glaring at him angrily. Yi Xian blinked. "Why are you looking at me so angrily? Come over and hit me." The crowd, when the man in black heard Yi Xian's words, his Adam's apple moved, and then he said in a trembling voice, "Why are you bullying a woman?" As soon as he finished speaking, a sword suddenly pressed against the center of his brows. The man in black's body froze. Yi Xian suddenly pressed his right hand forward lightly. Swoosh! The sword pierced half an inch into the man's flesh, and fresh blood instantly covered the man's entire face. Yi Xian gazed at the man. "I'm bullying you right now. You're not a woman, right?" The man's voice trembled. You're from the Xingu clan." Yi Xian shook his head and chuckled. He glanced at the surroundings and said, "If all of you aren't convinced, then feel free to hit me. I'm right here." How arrogant! The youths of the Xingu clan were instantly infuriated when they heard this. However, not a single one of them stepped forward. The strength that Yi Xian revealed was truly too terrifying. Yi Xian chuckled lightly. "What? Do all the members of the Xingu clan only know how to fight a war of words?" Meanwhile, one of the men suddenly spoke furiously, "How dare you insult the Xingu clan? You!" A ray of light suddenly pressed against the center of the man's forehead. The man glared angrily at Yi Xian. "Kill me if you dare. I'm not afraid of death. I." Hiss! The sword pierced through the center of the man's forehead. Bang! The man's body was instantly obliterated. He'd truly been obliterated. At this moment, the expressions of all the experts of the Xingu clan changed drastically. They hadn't imagined that Yi Xian would really dare to kill in the Xingu clan. Suddenly, Gu Xian spoke coldly, "You're looking down on." He hadn't even finished speaking when a sword was suddenly pressed against the center of his forehead. Yi Xian turned around and said, "You're the most monstrous genius of the Xingu clan?" Gu Xian looked Yi Xian in the eyes, "Yes." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "Are you that weak?" Gu Xian's expression immediately became ferocious, "You humiliated me." Yi Xian shook his head, "What right do you have to make me humiliate you? Firstly, you can't afford to lose. Secondly, you still haven't recognized the facts after you lost." "What facts?" "That means that I'm someone you can't afford to offend. Do you know why I came to the Xingu clan? Because I can't defeat your patriarch. If I can't defeat him, then I admit defeat. You can't defeat me, yet you're still trying to act tough in front of me? Are you an idiot?" As soon as he finished speaking, the sword entered the center of Gu Xian's forehead, and it was about to crush Gu Xian. Right at this moment, a terrifying force suddenly enveloped Gu Xian, and then the sword within Gu Xian's body was blasted out. Meanwhile, an old man appeared in front of Gu Xian. It was the old man who'd been following the patriarch all this time. The old man gazed at Yi Xian, "Young Master Yi, you've gone too far." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "Have I?" As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled, "So this is the Xingu clan? How disappointing. Is this the education of a large clan?" As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The old man and the rest had ugly expressions on their faces. At this moment, the young Xingu clan expert started to berate Yi Xian, and asked Yi Xian to get out of the Xingu clan. Yi Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks, and he turned to look at the Xingu clan experts. "You're asking me to get out?" One of them said angrily, "Yes. This is the Xingu clan, and you're not a member of the Xingu clan. Hurry up and get lost." Yi Xian nodded, "I'll get lost then." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and rode on his sword, heading towards the depths of the starry sky. Seeing this, the old man's expression changed drastically. "Young Master Yi." As for Yi Xian, he'd already disappeared into the horizon. In the depths of the starry sky, Yi Xian, who was riding on his sword, suddenly stopped. Not far in front of him, stood a woman. This person was the patriarch of the Xingu clan. The woman looked at Yi Xian, and did not say anything. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "It's your clansmen who want me to get lost." The woman's expression was calm, "You're a little flashy." Yi Xian, the woman suddenly disappeared, and Yi Xian was stunned. The next moment, the scene in front of him changed, and in the blink of an eye, he and the woman appeared in the training field. There, the Xingu clan experts were still there. Seeing the woman, all the Xingu clan experts hurriedly bowed respectfully, "Patriarch." The woman turned to look at Yi Xian, "You said that the Xingu clan's education is like this. Can you elaborate?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "What did I say?" The woman looked at Yi Xian, "I feel that the Xingu clan really needs to change. Aren't you a teacher? Why don't I open a class for you in the Xingu clan?" Yi Xian shook his head, not interested. The woman frowned slightly. Yi Xian did not say anything else, and he turned to leave. "What a joke, you want me to teach? Do you think I'm stupid?" At this moment, the woman suddenly said, "I have money." Yi Xian stopped, and he turned to look at the woman, "How much?" The woman said, "We can negotiate." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, 10 million universe veins a month. Hearing this, the woman frowned again, "Why don't you go rob?" Yi Xian opened his palm, and a divine Tao code floated in front of the woman. "Have you seen this book?" The woman opened it, and in the next moment, she was stunned. In the distance, Yi Xian had a calm expression, "I wrote it. Qin Guan. P.S. thank you to all the friends who voted and tipped. This month's update is not especially for you, but everyone is still so supportive. I'm really ashamed. Writing is not everything in life. After all, I still have a real life. Also, sitting for a long time makes my back ache, and now I have to exercise every day. It's all tears. I'm really sorry for the lack of updates, please forgive me. Chapter 23-21. The woman gazed at Yi Xian. Did you write it? Yi Xian nodded, and then he put it away. He didn't waste his breath, and he just turned around and left. Meanwhile, the woman spoke abruptly, when you give them a lecture, will you talk about the divine Tao code that you wrote just now? Yi Xian stopped and shook his head, I won't. The woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Then why do you need 10 million universe veins a month? Yi Xian smiled, you don't have to invite me to give you a lecture. I don't have to give you a lecture. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. The woman frowned slightly, and no one knew what she was thinking. A short while later, the woman gazed at Gu Xian. The latter's expression changed slightly, and he lowered his head slightly. The woman gazed at Gu Xian with a dejected expression, you're not just a little bit inferior to him. As she spoke, she glanced at the surroundings, and all of you. Could it be that the Xingu clan can't afford to lose? All of them lowered their heads and didn't dare to reply. The woman continued, it's time for the Xingu clan to change. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. The expressions of the Xingu clan experts were extremely unsightly. Yi Xian found Shenlan. He noticed that the Xingu clan treated Shenlan well, and they were vigorously fostering Shenlan. However, it was still difficult to attain the demigod realm in the Xingu clan. Besides fortuitous encounters, one needed money as well. Shenlan had just returned, so the Xingu clan naturally wouldn't focus all their resources on her. After chatting with Shenlan for a while, he left, and it didn't take long for him to arrive at Divinity City. Divinity City was a subsidiary city of the Xingu clan, and it was the most prosperous city in the Xingu clan. Because it was within the Xingu clan's territory, the woman didn't restrict him. After a while, Yi Xian arrived at the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Just as he had guessed, there was also a Celestial Treasure Pavilion in Godly City. After arriving at the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, in order to avoid being looked down upon again, he immediately took out the Xiantian token. He was here to do something, not to act tough. Upon seeing the mysterious heaven medallion, the branch president of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion immediately came out to welcome him. He was a fat middle-aged man with a body full of fat that weighed at least 150 kilograms. As he walked, his fat jiggled. This middle-aged man was called Su Tian, and he was in charge of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion in the ancient god world. Su Tian bowed respectfully to Yi Xian, young Master Yi. Yi Xian nodded. Let's talk inside. After saying that, he walked inside. Su Tian wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and hurriedly followed. In the room, Yi Xian sat while Su Tian stood, his body half bent. Yi Xian said, you sit too. Su Tian quickly shook his head. No, I'll just stand. Yi Xian said with a smile, I came to you because I need your help with something. Su Tian bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, please instruct me. I will do my best within my ability. Yi Xian said, tell me about the Emperor Desolate God clan and the Xingu clan. Su Tian said solemnly, in this godly universe, there are 3 superpowers. The Emperor Desolate God clan and the Xingu clan are 2 of them. Yi Xian frowned slightly. There's another one? Su Tian nodded and smiled. The other one is my Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then he smiled. There are many experts in the Celestial Treasure Pavilion here? Su Tian smiled. Yes. To be honest, I'm also a demigod. Demigod? Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment, he immediately stood up and said, "You're a demigod?" Su Tian nodded. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Then why are you so respectful to me? Why don't you sit down too?" Su Tian smiled bitterly. "Young Master Yi, although I'm a demigod, in front of the Yang clan, I'm just a fart." Yi Xian was curious. "You've seen someone from the Yang clan?" Su Tian nodded. "I was fortunate enough to see him once." Yi Xian was curious. "Who did you see?" Su Tian hesitated for a moment before saying, "Green shirt Swordmaster." Yi Xian's expression froze. This guy actually saw the most powerful person in the Yang clan. No wonder he was so humble to him. Thinking of this, Yi Xian couldn't help but shake his head and smile. Su Tian said again, "Young Master Yi, why are you here?" Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and told him about the grudge between him and the Shingu clan. After listening, Su Tian frowned. "Young Master Yi, she threatened you?" Yi Xian smiled. "You can say that." Su Tian's expression immediately turned cold. "Men." As soon as the voice fell, an old man appeared behind Su Tian. Su Tian's expression was gloomy. "From now on, cut off all economic relations with the Shingu clan. Also, my celestial treasure pavilion will immediately withdraw from the ancient god world." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and bowed slightly. "Young Master Yi, if there's a need, my celestial treasure pavilion will declare war on the Shingu clan now." Hearing that, the old man behind Su Tian was stunned. What was going on? Yi Xian shook his head. "Not at the moment." Su Tian was puzzled. "Why?" Yi Xian smiled. "I want to gain some experience." What he needed the most now was a battle. A demigod was too strong. There was no point in fighting. Therefore, he needed to find the world's top powerhouses of the same level to fight. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Su Tian nodded slightly. "All right. If young Master Yi needs anything, just let me know." Yi Xian smiled. "Tell me about the Emperor Wasteland God clan." Su Tian said solemnly, "The Emperor Wasteland God clan is much stronger than the Shingu clan. They are strong in the younger generation. The difference between the younger generation of the Shingu clan and the Emperor Wasteland God clan is like heaven and earth." Yi Xian frowned. "The difference is huge?" Su Tian nodded, "It's not just big. There is a super monster in the younger generation of the Emperor Wasteland God clan called Dizhuang. This person is not an ordinary monster. As far as I know, she might be about to become a demigod." Demigod? Hearing that, Yi Xian was stunned. "She's that abnormal?" Su Tian nodded and smiled bitterly. "I have to say, I'm also very shocked. But I also understand that many people in this world cannot be judged by common sense." Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, he thought of Qing Qiu. This girl was also a monster. Su Tian continued, "The Shingu clan has no good intentions in letting young Master Yi compete with the Emperor Wasteland God clan. If young Master Yi wins, it will naturally be good. If young Master Yi loses, they won't lose out either. Furthermore, if young Master Yi dies in the hands of the Emperor Wasteland God clan, then the Shingu clan will have made a killing, because they know that the person behind young Master Yi will definitely not let the Emperor Wasteland God clan off." As he said that, a cold light flashed in his eyes. "That woman is so vicious." Yi Xian smiled slightly, "It is indeed a bit vicious." Su Tian said in a deep voice, "Young Master Yi, if you really fight with this Dizhuang, then you must not underestimate her. This woman is not simple." Yi Xian nodded, "I know." As he spoke, he stood up. As if he had thought of something, he asked, "Do you know much about those ancient gods and ancient gods?" Su Tian shook his head. I don't know much. I only know that anyone who has reached the God realm has already left the God universe and headed to a higher universe. And this Xingu clan and the Emperor Wasteland God clan both had ancient gods and ancient gods among their ancestors. Yi Xian was a little curious. What's the difference between these ancient gods and ancient gods? Su Tian thought for a moment, then said, I don't know the specific difference, I only know that these ancient gods are much stronger than ancient gods. Yi Xian nodded slightly, understood. As he said that, he cupped his fists. President Su, I won't be staying here any longer. Farewell. Su Tian bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, take care. Yi Xian nodded, then turned and disappeared. After Yi Xian left, Su Tian frowned slightly. Is this Xingu clan tired of living? They actually captured this young Master Yi. Behind Su Tian, the old man was a little curious. President, this young man is? Su Tian said softly, Young Master Yi. Yang clan's young Master Yi. The old man frowned slightly. Yang clan? What power? Su Tian smiled bitterly, a power so strong that it can almost make people despair. The old man said in a deep voice, Why have I never heard of it? Su Tian smiled lightly, Do you know about the ancient gods? The old man nodded, Of course. Su Tian looked into the distant sky, and said softly, In front of the Yang clan, the ancient gods are not even comparable to dogs. The old man's face was full of shock. Su Tian said again, This Xingu clan. I'm afraid it's over. After saying that, his expression suddenly turned cold. Immediately pay attention to the Xingu clan, immediately inform me if they do anything unusual. As he said that, he paused, then said again, Forget it. I'll personally pay attention to it. After saying that, he directly disappeared on the spot. The old man was speechless. Yi Xian returned to the Xingu clan. At this time, the Xingu clan woman appeared in front of him. She looked at Yi Xian. You went to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion? Yi Xian nodded. I'm a super VIP of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. There's no problem with me going to take a look, right? The woman nodded. Of course. Yi Xian smiled. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, I'm going to cultivate. The woman said, 10 million universe veins a month, right? Yi Xian smiled lightly. Why, you're willing now? The woman nodded. I'm willing. However, you only have half a month's time. After all, you have to compete in half a month, so I can only give you 5 million universe veins. Yi Xian thought about it, and then said, All right. However, I have a request. No matter what I do, you can't interfere. The woman looked at Yi Xian. As long as you don't kill me, you can do whatever you want. Yi Xian smiled. All right. The woman opened her palm, and a token floated in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this token is like seeing the clan leader. Yi Xian shook his head. No need. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. The woman frowned slightly. Yi Xian found Gu Xian, and Gu Xian's expression instantly changed when he saw Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. From now on, you'll listen to everything I say. Is there a problem? Gu Xian looked at Yi Xian. The clan leader made you our teacher, but it doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. Yi Xian's smile suddenly vanished. Do you believe that I won't kill you right now? Gu Xian was shocked when he saw this, and he knew that the man before him wasn't joking. Yi Xian suddenly withdrew his gaze, turned around, and left. Ask all the younger generation of the Xingu clan to come to the training grounds. I'll break the legs of anyone who's late in 15 minutes. Gu Xian said in a low voice. What are you going to do? Yi Xian didn't even look back. I'm going to teach all of you how to act cool. Gu Xian was speechless. 7017K. Chapter 23-22. The Training Grounds. It didn't take long for a few hundred people to gather at the training grounds. All of them were members of the younger generation of the Xingu clan. On the other hand, Yi Xian sat on a stone platform in front of them, and he was reading an ancient book with great interest. Gu Xian gazed silently at Yi Xian from below. On the other side, the patriarch of the Xingu clan was watching Yi Xian from the shadows as well. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly put down the book in his hand, and then he glanced at the crowd below and said, "Is everyone here?" As soon as he finished speaking, a man suddenly ran over hastily. Yi Xian gazed at the man. The man's expression instantly changed, and he spoke with a trembling voice, I was delayed." A sword suddenly pierced through the center of the man's forehead, and then it nailed him to the ground. It hadn't killed him, just nailed him to the ground. The expressions of all the experts of the Xingu clan changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. That was too bloody. However, no one dared to say a word. Because they knew that this fellow before them wasn't just ordinarily ruthless, and he really dared to kill. Suddenly, all of them turned around and saw a woman in a white dress running over from not too far away. She seemed to be around 17 or 18 years of age, and she seemed delicate and weak. Her face instantly turned ghastly pale when she arrived below the arena and saw the man who was nailed to the ground. The woman gazed at Yi Xian and spoke with a trembling voice, I was delayed. Yi Xian grinned, "Don't be nervous. It's very normal for you to be delayed. Find a place to sit." All of them froze on the spot when they heard this. What's going on? The woman instantly heaved a sigh of relief when she heard Yi Xian, and then she hurriedly bowed deeply before she ran over to the side and sat down. The man who was nailed to the ground had disbelief written all over his face. "No. Why? I'll be nailed if I'm late, but she'll be fine if she's late. Why?" Yi Xian glanced at the man who was nailed to the ground and spoke indifferently, "She's a beauty." The man's expression froze on his face. Everyone. Yi Xian looked at the pinned man. "Are you not satisfied?" The man hesitated for a moment before he said, "I have a little." Just as he finished speaking, another sword suddenly pierced through his right shoulder. Boom! The man's body split open and blood splattered everywhere. Everyone, Yi Xian looked at the man. "Do you have any other questions?" The man gulped. "If you're going to play like this, then I have no problem." Everyone, Yi Xian nodded. "Then let's continue the lesson. Today, I will talk to everyone about reality." Reality. Everyone looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian glanced at the crowd. "Do you know what reality is?" Meanwhile, a young man spoke abruptly, "A man who's late will be crippled, but a woman who's late will be fine. That's the reality." Yi Xian looked at the man who spoke. The man glanced at Yi Xian with a hint of politeness in his eyes. Yi Xian smiled. "What's your name?" The man said in a deep voice, "Gu Lin." Yi Xian nodded. "You're right." As he spoke, he looked at Gu Xian. "You're the #1 genius of the ancient race, right?" Gu Xian looked straight at Yi Xian. "Yes." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you know why your clan head sent me here?" Gu Xian fell silent. Yi Xian looked at Gu Xian. "Let me tell you what reality is. Because you can't do it, your clan head sent me here to replace you. That's reality. After I came, you challenged me. After I made my move, you should have recognized the reality and understood that you were no match for me. However, you didn't recognize the reality and continued to stick your finger at me. Let me tell you, it's only because I've read more books that my temper has become better. If it were in the past, the grass on your grave would already be 3 zhang tall." Hearing this, Gu Xian's expression turned ugly. He glared at Yi Xian angrily. Yi Xian sneered. "You're still glaring at me. Let me ask you, can you beat me?" Gu Xian said angrily, "I can't beat you. However, I'd rather die than be humiliated. Yi Xian frowned. Why do you think I'm humiliating you? Is it difficult to be a coward if you can't beat me? As he spoke, he glanced at the crowd. Is it difficult? Everyone fell silent. Gu Xian sneered. A man can die, but his backbone cannot be broken. Yi Xian looked at Gu Xian. It seems like you're still not convinced. Let's fight again. Gu Xian stood up immediately. Let's fight. As soon as he finished speaking, a sword ray slashed towards him. Gu Xian's pupils constricted. He raised his arms to block the attack. Bang! Before everyone's eyes, Gu Xian's body shattered. In the next moment, a sword pierced through his soul and nailed him in space. Everyone was speechless. Yi Xian looked at Gu Xian. Gu Xian's soul gradually burned and vanished bit by bit. Everyone's expression changed drastically when they saw this. Yi Xian looked at Gu Xian calmly. Gu Xian stared at Yi Xian. Kill me if you have the guts. Yi Xian smiled. The reason you said that is because you know your clan leader is watching. You know your clan leader won't allow me to kill you. Because you're the most monstrous genius of the Xingu clan. You represent the future of the Xingu clan. Gu Xian clenched his fists tightly. His gaze was icy cold as he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. He turned around to look at the woman on the city wall, and he smiled. At this moment, I suddenly feel slightly envious of my father. The woman gazed at Yi Xian in silence. Yi Xian continued, what are you envious of him for? I'm envious that he has such an outstanding son like me. The green-clothed man was speechless. Everyone else was speechless. The woman withdrew her gaze and gazed at Gu Xian with a calm expression. Gu Xian clenched his fists tightly. His soul was still vanishing bit by bit. Moreover, the woman had no intention of speaking or attacking. The expressions of the experts of the Xingu clan instantly became unsightly. Does the clan leader really intend to allow this outsider to kill Gu Xian? Yi Xian sat cross-legged at the side and continued reading. He would definitely not kill Gu Xian if the woman spoke. However, Gu Xian would be completely crippled. Why? Because one had to learn to recognize oneself. If one couldn't, then one would become arrogant and lose oneself. Why was Gu Xian so daring? Because his confidence was built upon the clan leader, and he was sure that the clan leader wouldn't allow him to die. If the woman spoke, then Gu Xian would continue to become arrogant. Besides being impotent, the greatest misfortune in one's life was not being able to recognize oneself while one was still alive. Gu Xian's soul was growing fainter and fainter. The clan leader had no intention of speaking, and Yi Xian had no intention of stopping as well. The countenances of the experts of the Xingu clan instantly turned pale when they witnessed this scene. Are they abandoning Gu Xian? At this moment, Gu Xian was slightly panicked. Is the Xingu clan really abandoning me? Suddenly, the clan leader spoke abruptly, besides me, anyone in the Xingu clan is fine. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Gu Xian's face instantly turned pale when he heard her. At this moment, he came to an understanding. He truly came to an understanding. Genius? Monstrous genius? Utterly useless. Unless one was monstrous to the point of being able to change the rise and fall of a clan, otherwise, what was the point? If I'm a demigod right now, would the clan abandon me just like that? Of course not. At this moment, he suddenly recognized himself. Gu Xian hurriedly gazed at Yi Xian. I admit my wrongs. He admitted his wrongs. The experts of the Xingu clan instantly heaved sighs of relief. As for Yi Xian, he continued reading and showed no intention of stopping. The experts of the Xingu clan were instantly infuriated. One of them immediately stood up and spoke furiously, "I've already admitted my wrongs. Are you really going to kill me? You!" Hiss. A sword suddenly pierced through the center of his forehead. The man was nailed to the space in the distance. Yi Xian turned around to gaze at the other gray-clothed man who'd stood up. The gray-clothed man spoke with a trembling voice, I just sat for too long, and my legs are slightly numb. I wanted to get up and move around a bit. I didn't mean anything else." All of them were speechless. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and then he withdrew his gaze and continued reading. Meanwhile, Gu Xian spoke abruptly, 10 million universe veins. I'll give you 10 million universe veins if you spare my life. Yi Xian suddenly snapped his fingers. Slap. A sword suddenly flew out from within Gu Xian's soul. Yi Xian flicked his finger, and a pill flew slowly towards Gu Xian. The soul-nurturing pill is worth 10 million universe veins. Don't say that I'm trying to extort you. I, Yi Xian, am not that sort of person. All of them were speechless. Gu Xian glanced at Yi Xian, and then he didn't hesitate to take the pill and consume it. His soul started to recover swiftly after he consumed it. Gu Xian instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he witnessed this scene. I finally won't die. Yi Xian gazed at Gu Xian. Gu Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, 2 hours. My family will gather 10 million universe veins within 2 hours. Yi Xian nodded slightly, all right. As he spoke, he gestured for Gu Xian to sit. Brother Gu Xian, please sit. All of their expressions instantly became strange. Damn it. Is this fellow's brother just because he's rich? Gu Xian glanced at Yi Xian, and then he sat down. Yi Xian glanced at all of them and grinned. Everyone, the core objective of today's lesson is to be realistic. We must recognize ourselves clearly, or we'll definitely suffer a calamity if we don't. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the sky, then do you recognize yourself clearly? As soon as the voice resounded, a woman suddenly appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. She wore violet battle armor, and her hands were behind her back. She had an oval face and sharp brows, and her eyes were like stars. Moreover, there was a sense of heroism and composure between her brows. Her long hair was tied up high by a black ribbon, and it was long to her but like a ponytail. The most eye-catching thing was her chest. Big. Extremely big. Even the battle armor couldn't cover it, and it seemed like it was about to burst. The expressions of all the experts of the Xingu clan changed drastically when they saw this person. Emperor Makeup. The most monstrous genius of the Divine Clan's younger generation. Why is she here? Everyone had a puzzled expression on their faces. In the distance, Di Zhuang looked at Yi Xian. Do you recognize yourself? P.S. To be honest, I want to see you guys curse without any vulgarities. Come on, show off. 7017K. Chapter 23-23. Di Zhuang. Yi Xian had already recognized him. He was also a little surprised that he would show up here. But soon, he figured it out. She was here for Yi Xian. He had to admit that this girl was really big. Yi Xian retracted his gaze and smiled. Of course I recognize myself. Di Zhuang looked at Yi Xian. Is that so? Yi Xian nodded. I'm the king of reliance. Di Zhuang looked straight at Yi Xian. King of reliance? Yi Xian smiled. Those who know know, those who don't can forget about it. Di Zhuang sized up Yi Xian. You want to represent the Xingu clan? Yi Xian nodded. It was obvious that the Emperor Wilderness God race had already investigated him and was here to cause trouble for him. Di Zhuang looked around and said, there's a special array here. Why don't we fight now? Yi Xian was about to speak when the Xingu clan leader appeared. She looked at Yi Xian and shook her head. Yi Xian smiled. How can I refuse a challenge? He looked at Di Zhuang and smiled. Please. As his voice fell, the ancient god clan experts scattered in all directions. In the blink of an eye, only Yi Xian and Di Zhuang were left in the arena. The clan leader looked at Yi Xian. Use your pen or you'll die. Yi Xian smiled. Don't worry. The female chieftain glanced at Yi Xian and then turned around to leave. Di Zhuang looked at the pen at Yi Xian's waist. Your pen is good and must be very powerful. You can attack now. Yi Xian smiled. Why do you want me to attack first? Di Zhuang looked at Yi Xian. Because if I make a move, you might not have the chance to. Yi Xian smiled. Not only was this woman big, she was also very arrogant. Without thinking too much, he slowly closed his eyes. Chi. A wisp of sword light appeared. In the distance, Di Zhuang narrowed his eyes and suddenly blocked with his right arm. Boom! The sword light shattered, and Di Zhuang retreated 1,000 feet. Space and time around him were distorted. As soon as Di Zhuang stopped, another sword light slashed down. Di Zhuang suddenly punched with his right hand. Rumble! The sword light shattered and a terrifying fist force directly forced Yi Xian back by 100 feet. Initially, he wanted to retreat even further, but at the critical moment, he released his Mortal Realm sword intent. Di Zhuang looked at Yi Xian in surprise. Swordsman. Yi Xian nodded. He opened his palm, and the surrounding sword will suddenly condensed into a sword of sword will. The next moment, the sword that was condensed from sword will disappeared. Severing void. Severing void that contained the Mortal Realm sword intent. In the distance, Di Zhuang frowned and punched again. This time, a terrifying fist light surged from her fist and blocked Yi Xian's sword. Boom! The fist light disappeared, and the sword light did not, but the surrounding space and time were fading bit by bit. The martial arts field could not withstand the power of the two people. On the other side, the female clan leader suddenly pressed her right hand down. Boom! The space and time around the martial arts field suddenly returned to normal. At this time, Di Zhuang's fist light was gradually disappearing. It could not be blocked. Seeing this, Di Zhuang frowned. The next moment, she suddenly disappeared and punched again. Boom! The sword light from Yi Xian's sword light suddenly dimmed, but with the support of the Mortal Realm sword intent, the sword light did not dissipate. At this time, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Chi! A wisp of sword light appeared between Di Zhuang's brows like a ghost. Di Zhuang's expression was calm. She tilted her body slightly and dodged the terrifying sword. In the next moment, an afterimage flashed across the field. In the blink of an eye, the afterimage was already in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes and drew his sword. Rumble! The space and time in front of Yi Xian suddenly exploded, and then they retreated at the same time. As they retreated, sword light suddenly appeared around Di Zhuang and drowned her. Boom! Suddenly, a wave of sword light exploded, and in the blink of an eye, Di Zhuang appeared in front of Yi Xian. She raised her leg high and slashed it down at Yi Xian. A cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He did not dodge. Instead, he twisted his right wrist and stabbed his sword at Di Zhuang's chest. But Di Zhuang did not stop. Boom! Hiss! Yi Xian instantly retreated to the edge of the arena, and he only stopped when he collided with the strange barrier. In an instant, the barrier trembled violently, and then it cracked open completely. At the same time, the space and time in the surroundings actually started to be obliterated. Meanwhile, the patriarch suddenly raised her right hand and pressed it down once more. Bang! In an instant, the space and time in the surroundings returned to normal. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's body was shattering bit by bit in the distance. However, Yi Xian's sword had pierced Di Zhuang's stomach as well. His sword hadn't been able to shatter Di Zhuang's body, but it had suppressed Di Zhuang's soul. Soul suppression. At the same time, the uniqueness of severing the void started to madly corrode Di Zhuang's soul. Di Zhuang slowly closed her eyes. Suddenly, she shouted, and a strand of terrifying energy swept out from within her. Bang! The sword within her was blasted away. Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and the sword returned firmly to his hand. Di Zhuang suddenly vanished on the spot. Yi Xian closed his eyes slightly, and the sword in his hand mysteriously vanished. Hiss! The space and time in front of Yi Xian were suddenly torn apart, and a sword tore through the air. At this moment, Di Zhuang's fist slammed against the sword. Rumble! The sword shook violently, and a strand of terrifying energy passed through it and headed straight for Yi Xian. In the distance, Yi Xian's expression was calm. When the terrifying energy arrived in front of him, a few rays of sword light suddenly appeared in front of him. Hiss! 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 The terrifying energy was directly torn apart by the rays of sword light. At this moment, Di Zhuang suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and her fist headed straight for Yi Xian's face. Yi Xian had nowhere to dodge. He didn't choose to dodge either. He allowed the fist to strike his head, but his sword also slashed at Di Zhuang's stomach at a terrifying speed. Bang! Hiss! In an instant, Yi Xian's physical body shattered, and his soul retreated hundreds of feet. At this moment, Di Zhuang's physical body turned into nothingness, and her soul retreated. As she retreated, several rays of sword light slashed at her head and tail. Di Zhuang narrowed her eyes, not daring to let these rays of sword light hit her. She was now a soul body, and Yi Xian's sword light could restrain souls. If she was hit, her spiritual soul might be destroyed. Di Zhuang opened her right hand, and a spear appeared in her hand. The next moment, she stabbed with the spear. Bang! Several rays of sword light instantly turned into nothingness, and along with them, the enchantment and space and time around the entire martial arts field shattered. One spear broke everything. Everything was pitch black. In the distance, the Xingu clan leader looked at Di Zhuang without saying a word. She didn't repair the surrounding space and the martial arts field. Di Zhuang looked at Yi Xian. I underestimated you. In the distance, Yi Xian smiled slightly. You're very strong. Di Zhuang stared at Yi Xian. You're not bad either. Yi Xian smiled. Do you still want to fight? Di Zhuang was about to speak when she frowned and looked up. After a moment, she looked away. I have something to do. We'll fight again in half a month. With that, she turned to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Wait. Di Zhuang stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. What is it? Yi Xian smiled slightly. He opened his palm, and 2 bottles of elixirs slowly floated in front of Di Zhuang. These elixirs, one can repair the soul, and the other can repair the physical body. You'll need them. Di Zhuang was slightly taken aback, and then she said, For me? Yi Xian nodded. Di Zhuang looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian smiled. You and I are just sparring. This time, it's considered a friendly match. Di Zhuang was silent. Yi Xian said again, It's just 2 elixirs. If you feel burdened, you don't have to. Di Zhuang glanced at Yi Xian. You're a very interesting person. Let me give you a piece of advice, stay away from the Xingu clan. With that, she put away the 2 elixir bottles and turned to leave. Yi Xian watched Di Zhuang disappear into the distant horizon. This girl won't try to kill me again, will she? He thought. At this moment, the Xingu clan leader woman appeared in front of Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian without a word. Yi Xian looked at the woman in front of him and frowned. This woman is always like this. Yi Xian smiled. You're looking at me like this without saying a word. Are you trying to create an invisible pressure on me? If that's the case, you'll be disappointed. After meeting Qing, his father, and his big brother, no matter what kind of strong masters, they would not be able to give him any psychological pressure. The Xingu clan leader looked calm. I've underestimated you. Yi Xian smiled. Do you think I'll be killed by her? The Xingu clan leader nodded. Yi Xian smiled and said nothing. The Xingu clan leader asked again, do you know what's the scariest thing about her? Yi Xian shook his head. The Xingu clan leader looked at Yi Xian. The scariest thing about her is that she's good at using 2 spears. Just now, she only used a single spear. Yi Xian was taken aback. The next moment, he chuckled. Do you think I used my full strength? How naive. With that, he turned and left. The Xingu clan leader looked at Yi Xian in the distance. She frowned. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian went back to his room. As soon as he returned to his room, someone knocked on the door. Yi Xian said, "Come in." The door opened and a woman walked in. Yi Xian was a little surprised to see the person, because it was the woman who had been late. The woman wore a white dress. Her legs were long and slender. Although she was not devastatingly beautiful, she could be considered a beauty. Yi Xian asked, "What's the matter?" The woman nodded. She suddenly turned and closed the door. Yi Xian was struck dumb at the sight of this. At this time, the woman suddenly started to take off her clothes. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. F***ck. What are you doing? The woman lowered her head and said softly, "I want you to help me, but I don't have anything to give you. I think you're a pervert. I'll give myself to you." Yi Xian's expression froze. Chapter 23-24. Stop. Yi Xian suddenly stood up with a solemn expression. The woman was given a fright, and her clothes that had already been untied slid down. Of course, there were still clothes underneath. Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Put on your clothes." The woman hesitated for a moment before saying, "No." Yi Xian was speechless. The woman wanted to continue delaying, but a strand of sword intent locked onto her. The woman raised her head to look at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, "You." Yi Xian waved his sleeve, and the woman's clothes were all put on. In the next moment, the woman was blasted out of the door. Outside the door, the woman was stunned. Yi Xian looked at the woman outside with a cold expression. "Am I very easy to talk to?" Hearing this, the woman was shocked and hurriedly shook her head. Yi Xian looked at the woman coldly. If a woman doesn't have self-respect, how can others respect her? I don't care what your reasons are, but I hate your behavior. Every time you encounter trouble, you sell yourself and use your body to exchange for benefits. He shook his head slightly. I don't want to say anything too hurtful, but do you think that your behavior is appropriate? The woman lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "What do you want to exchange with me?" The woman fell silent. "Speak." Yi Xian suddenly shouted. His voice was like thunder, and it was terrifying. The woman's heart shook and she hurriedly said, "Cultivation resources." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "For cultivation resources?" The woman nodded and said with a trembling voice, "Yes." At this moment, some people rushed over. Seeing this, the woman's face instantly turned pale. If others found out about this, she would lose all face. At this moment, Yi Xian waved his sleeve. Boom! A strand of sword intent surged out, and in an instant, the people who rushed over were blasted back. Seeing this, the woman looked up at Yi Xian with a dazed expression. Yi Xian looked at the woman and did not speak. The woman said with a trembling voice, "You look down on me, right?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No. I'm just angry." When he found out that this woman wanted to use her body to exchange for resources, he did not look down on her. Instead, he felt more anger and sorrow. How difficult would it be for a nobody without a backer to change his fate? When the normal path couldn't satisfy them, many people would try to take the crooked path. Most of the time, the crooked path was always easier than the right path, especially for women. If they made the wrong choice, money might not be that hard to earn for them. He didn't want to criticize these people, but this was wrong. Being poor was not a reason for you to make mistakes. Because once you took a wrong step, every step you took would be wrong, and then you would step into the bottomless abyss. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "Do you want to study?" The woman was stunned. Read books?" Yi Xian nodded. Reading can change one's fate. The woman hesitated. Yi Xian smiled faintly. He opened his palm, and a divine path code slowly floated in front of the woman. The woman took it and had a look. In the next moment, her pupils suddenly constricted. In an instant, she knelt down and said in a trembling voice, "Thank you, thank you." A gentle sword intent suddenly lifted the woman up. Yi Xian smiled. "Are you willing to study?" The woman took a deep breath. She hugged the divine Tao code tightly with both hands and said firmly, "Yes." Yi Xian nodded. He opened his palm, and a small wooden token appeared in front of the woman. On the wooden token, there were 2 words engraved, Guan Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "From now on, you are a member of my Guan Xian Academy." The woman bowed deeply. "Greetings, Dean." Yi Xian walked in front of the woman. He took out a handkerchief and handed it to the woman. "I'm not preaching, but in the future, you have to love yourself. If you don't love yourself, how can others love you?" The woman took the handkerchief. She lowered her head slightly. "Okay." Yi Xian smiled and turned to leave. At this moment, the woman suddenly raised her head. "Why are you so good to me?" Yi Xian stopped. After a moment of silence, he said, "I have a wish. To establish a heart for the universe, to establish a life for all living beings, to pass on the lost knowledge for the past sages, and to establish peace for all ages." As he spoke, he shook his head and laughed self-deprecatingly. "But before this, I've always been accepting geniuses with great talent. I've never thought about those ordinary people. Those geniuses with great talent will be welcomed and valued by the sects wherever they go. But what about those ordinary people with poor talent? Just like you. Everyone values geniuses and geniuses. What about those ordinary people?" As he said this, he turned to look at the woman and smiled. "From now on, my academy will not set any threshold. We will no longer measure any student based on talent. Anyone who wants to learn will be welcomed by my academy. I may not be able to be absolutely fair, but I'm willing to give these ordinary people a platform and a chance. I'll let them have a chance to stand out like those geniuses." With that, he turned to leave. At this moment, a sword hum suddenly soared into the sky from his body. In the next moment, a terrifying sword intent soared into the sky. Boom! In an instant, the entire starry sky boiled and gradually disappeared. The sword intense aura grew stronger and stronger. Gradually, it erupted like a volcano, unleashing an extremely terrifying power. In an instant, the entire starry sky above the Xingu clan was wiped out. Under the shroud of the sword intent, the countless experts of the Xingu clan were terrified. Demigod. It was not the human who had reached the demigod realm, but the human world sword intent that had reached the demigod realm. Below, Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the pitch-black sky above him. After a moment of silence, he said softly, "An unintentional willow grows shade." After he finished speaking, he walked towards the room. At this moment, the terrifying sword intent suddenly disappeared without a trace, as though it had never appeared. Behind Yi Xian, the woman was stunned for a moment before she said softly, "My name is Gu Ran." Gu Ran. Yi Xian did not know that his small act of giving out a book would create such a terrifying existence. Gu Ran. Guanxian Academy was second only to the Qingqiu Empress. In Guanxian Academy, she founded the Kindness Academy and was the first Kindness Academy master. She did good deeds all her life and achieved great success in the path of kindness. Her students were all over the universe. After that, she spent her entire life searching for the first dean of Guanxian Academy, Yi Xian. On the other side, the clan leader looked at the room Yi Xian was in and remained silent. She had already arrived when Yi Xian first used his sword intent to chase away the experts of the Shingu clan. She had heard the entire conversation between Yi Xian and Gu Ran clearly. She had also seen it when Yi Xian's sword intent reached the demigod level. Yi Xian's words shocked her. To establish a heart for the universe, to establish a life for all living beings, to continue learning for the past sages, and to establish peace for all ages, the woman was truly shocked. She could not imagine that the man before her would have such great ambitions. The most frightening thing was that this man's sword intent had reached the demigod level. She was also a genius. She had spent tens of thousands of years to reach the demigod level from the see-through realm, but this man before her had so easily made her sword intent reach the demigod level. This was a little ridiculous. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was this man's way of doing things. She had seen the Divine Way Codex before. It could be said that it was a priceless divine book, but Yi Xian had given it away just like that. Not even blinking an eye. Was he that generous? The woman was silent for a long time before she turned and left. Because Yi Xian's sword intent breakthrough had caused a huge commotion, many outside forces had rushed to the ancient god world to inquire about it. However, the clan leader had blocked all news and chased away everyone outside. This also made many forces even more curious. Especially the Imperial Wilderness Celestial Clan. Imperial Wilderness Celestial Clan. On a mountain peak somewhere. Dizhuang sat cross-legged on the ground. There were 2 spears stabbed into the ground on either side of her, and a white-robed elder stood beside her. At this moment, Dizhuang opened her eyes. Demigod-level sword intent? The white-robed elder nodded. Confirmed. The corner of Dizhuang's mouth lifted slightly. Not bad. The white-robed elder said in a deep voice, "Don't underestimate him." Dizhuang nodded. Understood. With that, she slowly closed her eyes. The white-robed elder quietly retreated. He came to a river where an old man was fishing with his legs crossed. The white-robed elder came to the old man's side and bowed slightly. Clan leader. This old man who was fishing was Di Yuan of the Imperial Wilderness Celestial Clan. Di Yuan chuckled. That young man's sword intent has reached the demigod level? The white-robed elder nodded. Confirmed. Di Yuan smiled slightly. Interesting. The white-robed elder wanted to say something but stopped. Di Yuan said softly, "That woman actually found such a genius. This is something I never expected." The white-robed elder said in a deep voice, "This person comes from the universe of gods and is the dean of an academy. Guanxian Academy is a very ordinary academy. As for this person, his origin is quite mysterious." With that said, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. No matter what, this person is helping the Shingu clan, which means he's our enemy. Since he's our enemy, we can send someone to Guanxian Academy, Di Yuan frowned. You cultivate every day. Can't you cultivate your brain a little? The white-robed elder was stunned. Di Yuan said indifferently, this person is so monstrous. How can he be an ordinary person? If we go against his academy, isn't that what that woman wants? If we go against him now, it's equivalent to having another enemy for no reason. Moreover, it's an unknown enemy. Understand? The white-robed elder said in a deep voice, then he's helping the Xingu clan. Di Yuan shook his head. Our top priority now is to find out why he's helping the Xingu clan. Is it voluntary or forced? If it's voluntary, there must be a reason. If it's forced. With that said, the corners of his mouth curled up like an old fox. Then won't our chance come? The white-robed elder frowned. Rope him in? Di Yuan smiled. It's not impossible. The white-robed elder was silent for a moment before saying, I'll continue investigating. Di Yuan shook his head. No need. The white-robed elder was stunned. Di Yuan said indifferently, I'll investigate it myself. With that said, he stood up and left. But soon, he stopped and turned around. That young man likes to read? The white-robed elder nodded. Every day, he doesn't leave his hands. The white-robed elder pondered for a moment before saying, Go and collect all the ancient books of the Imperial Wilderness God clan. With that said, he smiled. Those who are lustful, will send beauties. Those who like to read, will send books. It's not important whether we can rope him in or not. What's important is to show our goodwill. The white-robed elder hesitated for a moment before saying, Clan leader, is there a need for us to treat a young man like this? It's too. Shut up. Di Yuan suddenly said angrily. Do you know how long it took me to reach demigod from the see-through realm? 12,000 years. And look at that young man, damn it, he can reach demigod's sword intent at such a young age. This kind of person is a talent. In this era, what's the most important thing? Talent. The white-robed elder said in a deep voice. We have the Emperor's makeup. Di Yuan said indifferently. We do have the Emperor's makeup. But have you ever thought about what if the Emperor's makeup falls in love with this young man? With that said, he suddenly smirked. That's 1 + 1 = 2. 2 super geniuses. If they give birth to a child, it'll be 3 geniuses. If they give birth to 2 children, it'll be 4 geniuses. He, the elder. P.S. My throat has been very uncomfortable recently. Chapter 23-25. Seeing that his clan leader had fallen into a beautiful fantasy, the old man hurriedly said, Clan leader, Di Zhuang's feelings. I'm afraid we can't control them. Di Yuan said indifferently, Of course I know. But we can help. For example, if we form a good relationship with that young man, it will be equivalent to creating an opportunity for them. If we become enemies with that young man, then she and that young man won't have any chance. As he said that, he sighed softly. As an elder, we must consider the next generation when we do things. Most of the time, you can't be too extreme. If you are too extreme, the next generation will have no room for reconciliation. With that, he turned and left. The old man was speechless. At the Xingu clan, Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the room with his eyes closed. In front of him was a sword. It wasn't the sword that his father had given him, but a sword that he had condensed from sword intent. Sword intent breakthrough. This was something he hadn't expected. Moreover, this sword intent had reached the level of a demigod. It had to be said that this was very surprising. Yi Xian opened his palm and the sword condensed from sword intent fell into his palm. He slowly closed his eyes. Feel the sword intent. Yi Xian felt the power of the human world in this sword intent. Before this, he didn't know how to improve the sword intent and power of the human world. But now, he understood a little. The transformation of the heart. Every time his state of mind transformed, the sword intent and the power of the human world would be improved. Of course, what he said to Gu Ren earlier wasn't for a breakthrough, but because he really felt it. His academy should be bigger in scope, and it should do something for more ordinary people. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at the sword in his hand. Not to mention anything else, he wanted to find Di Zhuang and fight. To fight to his heart's content. At this moment, the Xingu clan's clan leader suddenly appeared in the room. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. Then, he said, "Don't you knock first before entering the room?" The clan leader looked at Yi Xian. "It's time for your class." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Class?" The female chief said calmly, 5 million universe veins, half a month, is it just for one lesson? Yi Xian was speechless. The clan leader then said, "Go to class." Yi Xian smiled. "Have Gu Xian and the others changed since last time?" The patriarch nodded. "He no longer shows off his abilities, becoming much more low-key and calm." Yi Xian smiled and said, "That's enough." The matriarch looked at Yi Xian, "You can continue your lecture. Especially that divine Tao code that you showed me before. Tell me about this book." Yi Xian shook his head. "I'm not interested." With that, he got up and walked outside. The woman suddenly said, "Don't you want 5 million universe veins?" Yi Xian waved his hand. "Do as you wish." With that, he disappeared into the distance. The woman frowned. Yi Xian arrived at the martial arts practice field. At this moment, the barrier had been restored, and there were over 100 Xingu clan disciples here. These disciples were cultivating, but when they saw Yi Xian, they all stood up. They were still afraid of Yi Xian. This fellow had almost killed Gu Xian in the past. Yi Xian glanced at the Xingu clan disciples and smiled. "All of you continue cultivating. I want to try out the sword I just comprehended." Everyone looked at Yi Xian and didn't dare to speak. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, hundreds of swords condensed from sword intent appeared around him. Sensing this sword intent, the Xingu clan disciples' expressions changed drastically. The might of this sword intent seemed to want to crush them. It was extremely shocking. At this moment, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the hundreds of swords suddenly transformed into rays of sword light that fell into his palm. In the blink of an eye, he slashed with his sword. Hiss! As soon as he slashed with his sword, Yi Xian immediately sheathed his sword, and then he turned around and left. On the other hand, the entire martial arts practice field behind Yi Xian was gradually being obliterated. The Xingu clan disciples retreated swiftly and left the martial arts practice field. At this moment, the entire martial arts practice field had been completely obliterated. Everyone was slightly dazed. They turned to look at Yi Xian, who was in the distance. Yi Xian walked towards the distance with his sword in hand. He walked very slowly and calmly, and his clothes fluttered even though there was no wind. A Xingu clan disciple suddenly spoke in a trembling voice, "Did he just come here to put on a show?" All the others were speechless. On the other side, Yi Xian was stopped by the patriarch, and she gazed at Yi Xian, "You destroyed the martial arts practice field." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I didn't do it on purpose." She gazed at Yi Xian for a short while before she said, "I'll take you somewhere." Yi Xian was slightly curious, "Where?" She replied, "The immortal treasure world." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "The immortal treasure world?" She nodded, "It's a world established by the pavilion master of the immortal treasure pavilion, Qin Guan, and it's extremely prosperous. I'm going there to bid for something. Come with me." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Can I not go?" She looked at Yi Xian, "No?" Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why not? She spoke indifferently, if I'm not here, then no one in my clan can do anything to you. I'm afraid you'll act recklessly. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her right hand and vanished with Yi Xian on the spot. Yi Xian, actually, she was indeed slightly afraid of Yi Xian. If she wasn't here, then who could do anything to Yi Xian? No one. Moreover, she realized that this fellow was quite scheming. If no one restrained him, then who knew what he would do to the Xingu clan when she returned? It was better to take him away. Immortal Treasure Pavilion. On this day, Di Yuan came to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion to inquire about Yi Xian. The best place to do so was naturally the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, not only because the Celestial Treasure Pavilion had a powerful intelligence system, but also because Yi Xian was a super VIP of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. In the room, President Su Tian received Di Yuan. Di Yuan smiled, "Brother Su, I'll get straight to the point. I want all the information on young Master Yi." Su Tian smiled faintly, "No." Di Yuan frowned, "Why?" Su Tian chuckled, "I have no right to reveal young Master Ye's background to you." Hearing that, Di Yuan narrowed his eyes, "What background?" Su Tian suddenly raised his thumb and index finger, and then he rubbed them lightly, 10 million universe veins. Di Yuan's face instantly sank, "Brother Su, it hurts our relationship to talk about money." Su Tian smiled lightly, "Brother Di, I'm a businessman, and blood brothers should be fair." Di Yuan smiled, "That's true." As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a spatial ring flew over to Su Tian. Su Tian grinned as he put the spatial ring away, and then he said, "He's the Pavilion Master's friend." Di Yuan said, "Continue." Su Tian blinked, "You're done." Di Yuan stared at Su Tian, "Brother Su, you're going a bit too far." Su Tian smiled bitterly, "Brother Di, it's not that I'm greedy, but I don't dare tell you about his true background. It's too terrifying, and I don't want to be tainted by it." Di Yuan frowned slightly, "You don't dare to tell me?" Su Tian nodded. Di Yuan suddenly withdrew a spatial ring and placed it in front of Su Tian, and there were 20 million universe veins within it. Su Tian grabbed the spatial ring and said, "The Yang clan." Di Yuan spoke in a low voice, "I've never heard of it." Su Tian glanced at Di Yuan and said, "It's a terrifying power that exceeds our understanding, and he's the young master of the Yang clan." As he spoke, he turned to look outside and said softly, "Brother Di, this world is very, very big. Not to mention that we are just demigods, even a real ancient god, or even an ancient god, is just an ant in the eyes of some people." Di Yuan remained silent for a short moment, and then he smiled, "Brother Su, thank you." As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and was about to leave. However, he seemed to have thought of something, and he said, "Brother Su, you have to come to my wedding." Su Tian frowned slightly, "What wedding?" Di Yuan smiled, "To tell you the truth, after my daughter went to the Xingu clan to spar with young Master Yi, the two of them actually came to appreciate each other. In the end, they actually went from appreciating each other to loving each other. The reason I came to inquire about young Master Yi was because I wanted to find out more about my future son-in-law. In short, you have to come to my wedding." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Su Tian was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, "Brother Di, is what you said true?" Di Yuan was slightly displeased, "Can I speak carelessly about my daughter's reputation?" As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and continued walking, but he didn't fly. Su Tian suddenly grabbed Di Yuan, and then he placed the two spatial rings he just obtained into Di Yuan's hand. "Brother Di, little brother was only joking with you just now. You're right, talking about money hurts our relationship." Di Yuan said in a deep voice, "Brother Su, I know that you are doing business. I can understand. Don't worry. Today, you will receive my 30 million universe meridians. This matter will be known by the heavens, the earth, you, and I. I will definitely not tell my future son-in-law about this. Su Tian hurriedly shook his head, and then he forcefully placed the 2 spatial rings into Di Yuan's hand. Brother Di, I can't accept this money. Am I still human if I accept my brother's money? After the 2 of them refused for a while, Di Yuan finally took the spatial rings and left. After Di Yuan left, an old man appeared behind Su Tian, and the old man said in a low voice, President, you can't fully believe this old fellow's words. Su Tian's expression was calm. Of course I know. But I can't fucking gamble with him, because from what I know, this young Master Yi is indeed a bit of a playboy. As for him and this Di Zhuang, what if that girl and young Master Yi are really together? If I accept this old fellow's money, won't my path be narrow? Old man. In the space-time tunnel, Yi Xian and the clan leader's woman walked side by side. The clan leader's woman wore a black dress today, and her long hair casually draped behind her. Her face didn't have any traces of makeup, and it was very clean, just a bit cold. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Can you talk about this immortal treasure world? The clan leader nodded slightly. You know Qin Guan, right? Yi Xian nodded. The clan leader turned her head and looked at Yi Xian. This immortal treasure world has a college called Wuxia College. Don't you like to study? From what I know, this college also does learning. You can exchange some ideas when the time comes. Wuxia College. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Then I'll definitely pay a visit. Chapter 23-26. Immortal Treasure World. After entering the Immortal Treasure Realm, Yi Xian immediately discovered many spaceships. These spaceships came from all directions. Many of them flew up from the city below and then flew in all directions. Yi Xian looked down and saw a huge city in the depths of the starry sky. Immortal Treasure City. This Immortal Treasure City is the biggest city in the Immortal Treasure World, and it is also the only city. One world, one city. Yi Xian is curious about this Immortal Treasure City. This was built by Qin Guan. He knows that Qin Guan's way of thinking is different from other women. What would the city she built look like? Yi Xian smiled. Patriarch, let's go down. The woman suddenly said, My name is Gu Han. However, Yi Xian has already disappeared into the distance, as if he didn't hear it. The woman glanced at Yi Xian in the distance and then disappeared. Immortal Treasure City. Yi Xian came to the entrance of Immortal Treasure City. At the entrance, there is a stone platform with a box on it. At this moment, there are many people gathered around this stone platform. Yi Xian is curious and immediately walked over. He came to the stone platform and saw the box on it. There is nothing special about it, it looks like an ordinary box. At this moment, some people suddenly turned their heads and saw the patriarch slowly walking over. When she walked over, the people's expressions changed. Then, they quickly retreated and made way for her. Pressure. This woman only released a bit of pressure, but this pressure isn't something ordinary people can bear. The patriarch walked to Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian smiled. You don't like standing in the crowd? The patriarch's expression was calm. I don't like people being so close to me. Then, she looked at the box. This was left by Pavilion Master Qin. He said that he left it for the fated person. As long as you can match the token, this box can be opened. Yi Xian turned his head and saw a sentence beside the iron box. Heavenly King covers Earthly Tiger. The Heavenly King overpowers the Earthly Tiger? Yi Xian frowned. What kind of password was this? The woman said softly, This box is rather mysterious. Divine senses cannot penetrate it. Yi Xian glanced at the box and scanned it with his divine sense. However, just like what the clan leader said, he couldn't penetrate it. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. This Qin Guan likes to do these fancy things. Gu Han glanced at Yi Xian. Are you close to her? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Gu Han fell silent. Yi Xian glanced at the box and said with a smile, I wonder whose hands this box will fall into in the future. With that, he looked at Gu Han. Let's enter the city. Gu Han nodded, and the two of them walked into the city. After entering the city, Yi Xian discovered that the city was extraordinarily prosperous. The wide streets were filled with people, and most of them were cultivators. Gu Han suddenly said, these people came from all over the universe to do business here. Yi Xian looked at Gu Han. Business? Gu Han nodded. This celestial treasure city is equivalent to a transit station. It circulates all kinds of goods from all over the universe. It can be said that as long as you have money, you can buy anything. As long as you have good goods, you can basically sell them here. Yi Xian was a little curious. These people came here to do business. They will pay taxes, right? Gu Han nodded slightly. Anyone who comes to do business in this city has to pay 1% tax to Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Yi Xian said softly, it's not much. Gu Han nodded. It's indeed not much. However, even so, this Celestial Treasure Pavilion still earns a lot of money. Previously, someone estimated that this Celestial Treasure Pavilion earns tens of millions of universe veins just from taxes alone. Not to mention, they have other projects. Yi Xian was a little curious. Other projects? Gu Han looked at the tall buildings around them. All the buildings in this city belong to Pavilion Master Qin. Anyone who wants to do business here has to pay rent to Celestial Treasure Pavilion every month. Yi Xian's expression froze. All the businesses in this city belong to Qin Guan. How much rent does it cost every month? He didn't dare to think about it. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. Qin Guan, a rich woman. Gu Han said again. There's a good thing about this place. You can't use force here. No one can use force here. Yi Xian looked at Gu Han. Even you can't? Gu Han looked at Yi Xian. There are at least 3 ancient God Realm experts here. There are even ancient God Realm experts. No one dares to use force here unless they really don't want to live. She paused for a while before continuing. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian smiled. I'm a scholar. A scholar doesn't fight. He walked away after saying that. Gu Han glanced at Yi Xian before following. Along the way, Yi Xian looked around with interest. He had to admit that this city was very earthly, with the smell of smoke and fire. A while later, Gu Han brought Yi Xian to a tall building. Yi Xian looked up. Immortal Treasure Tower. Obviously, this was the property of Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Gu Han said, this place is suitable for cultivation. Every room is an independent starry sky world. It's very quiet. Of course, it's a little expensive. One night requires more than 1,000 universe veins. And this is the cheapest. The most expensive room requires 100,000 universe veins. 100,000 universe veins. Yi Xian looked at the tall building in front of him and sighed inwardly. Qin Guan, how much money do you have? In this world, there were 2 mysteries. First, how strong was Qin Er? Second, how much money did Qin Guan have? One was that he was invincible. The other was that he wasn't interested in money. Yi Xian sighed inwardly. When would I be able to show off like Qin Er and Qin Guan? Gu Han suddenly said, let's go in. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and nodded. The two of them had just entered the Immortal Treasure Tower when a pretty woman came over to greet them. She smiled. Are you looking for a place to stay? Gu Han nodded. 2 ordinary rooms. After saying that, she opened her palm and a spatial ring flew in front of her. There were 20,000 universe veins in the spatial ring. The cheapest? Yi Xian blinked and said, Patriarch, are you that thrifty? Gu Han glanced at Yi Xian. The family's wealth can't be squandered. Yi Xian gave a thumbs up. Amazing. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a command token appeared in front of the woman. Do you recognize this? The woman's expression changed drastically when she saw this, and she immediately bowed deeply to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian was slightly curious. You know me? The woman hurriedly said, up until now, the Pavilion Master has only issued a mysterious heaven token, and the owner of this mysterious heaven token is young Master Yi, Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. Don't be so nervous. What I mean is, are there any discounts when we stay here? The woman laughed bitterly. It's free. Young Master Yi's stay here is free of charge. Yi Xian blinked. Free of charge? The woman nodded. Both of you can stay in the Supreme Room. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Supreme Room? Gu Han suddenly said, 200,000 universe veins per night, 200,000. Yi Xian's expression froze, and he looked at Gu Han. Are there really people who stay in such expensive rooms? Even though he could be considered to be rich, he wasn't willing to spend 200,000 universe veins for a night. When she heard Yi Xian, the woman suddenly said, yes, and a lot. Yi Xian said in a low voice, are they really that rich? The woman hesitated for a moment before she said, yes. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, follow me. As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yi Xian and Gu Han up the stairs. They directly arrived at the second-last floor. As soon as Yi Xian opened the door to his room, a boundless starry sky entered his eyes. Yi Xian was slightly shocked. This wasn't an illusion, it was a real starry sky. However, this starry sky was connected to the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. The spirit energy in this starry sky was terrifyingly dense, and it was practically material. Moreover, there were some special formations in the surroundings. These formations were like barriers, and they were countless times stronger than the barriers in the Xingu clan's practice grounds. Meanwhile, the woman hesitated for a moment before she said, Young Master Yi, do you need any special services? Huh? Yi Xian turned around to look at the woman. Special services? The woman nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was slightly curious. What special services? The woman hesitated for a moment, and then she clapped her hands. In next to no time, a woman walked in slowly. The woman was tall and had a peerlessly beautiful appearance. She wore very little, and some parts of her body were faintly visible. It was truly alluring. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. How could Qin Guan do that? Do such a thing? The woman's expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly said, Young Master Yi, you've misunderstood. Yi Xian was slightly angry. Misunderstood? What have I misunderstood? The woman explained, they are only here to add to the fun, and then they will listen to your orders. They won't do anything else. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Won't do anything else? Then she's wearing so little. Is she trying to tempt the customers here? The woman smiled bitterly. Young Master Yi, they are willing. Look at their realms. Yi Xian turned around to look at the woman. Her realm was very low. The woman spoke in a low voice. They are extremely lacking in talent. If they were outside, their fates would be very tragic. The Pavilion Master allowed them to make a living here, and they are under the protection of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. They only do some service work. As she spoke, she looked at the woman. The reason she's wearing so little is because she's a dancer, and she's skilled in dancing. There's no other reason. Moreover, under normal circumstances, she only serves female customers. This time, I allowed her to come because it's you, young Master Yi. Yi Xian glanced at the woman. He discovered that she was indeed a virgin. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Is what you said true? The woman nodded quickly. How could this subordinate dare to deceive young Master Yi? The pavilion master once said that there are many ordinary women in this world. They are not talented, and those sects don't accept them. If they aren't strong enough, it's extremely dangerous outside. Thus, she asked us to take these women in and help them make a living, so that ordinary people like them can have a chance to make a name for themselves. As she spoke, she paused, lowered her head slightly, and said softly, I'm also one of these women. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. I'm sorry. I didn't investigate clearly before getting angry. It's my fault. The woman quickly shook her head. No, no. I didn't explain it clearly to young Master Yi. Yi Xian turned his head to look at the dancer in the distance. The woman was also looking at him. She was very calm from beginning to end. The woman suddenly said, Young Master Yi, if you don't like her, then I'll take her away. After that, she looked at the beautiful woman. Xiang Rong, let's go. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, let her stay. The woman was stunned. Then, she nodded. Okay. After that, she glanced at the woman named Xiang Rong. Her eyes flashed with worry, but she didn't say anything and retreated. In the starry sky, only Yi Xian and Xiang Rong were left. Xiang Rong suddenly said, You won't blame her, right? Yi Xian smiled. You're afraid that I'll blame her? Xiang Rong nodded, she's my good sister. Originally, she never asked me to receive male customers, but this time, she asked me to come, because she said that you're a very, very distinguished guest, and if I entertain you well, I'll give you a chance. If I take good care of you, I might have a chance to change your fate. Yi Xian was silent. Xiang Rong suddenly smiled. Young master, what's the special service you mentioned? Can you tell me? Yi Xian. P.S. By the way, am I the most punctual in updating? And the most stable? Chapter 23-27. Special Service. Yi Xian blushed with shame. His thoughts were a bit impure. Xiang Rong said again, Young Master Yi, do you want to watch me dance? I only need 100 universe veins each time. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and smiled slightly, no need, you can go down. Xiang Rong didn't go down. She slowly walked in front of Yi Xian and then looked directly at Yi Xian, Young Master, I know what special service you are talking about. If you need it, I can provide special service. Yi Xian's expression froze. Xiang Rong began to take off her clothes. But at this moment, a sword intent suddenly shrouded her. Xiang Rong looked up at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled slightly, why? Xiang Rong was silent. Yi Xian looked at Xiang Rong and asked again, why? Xiang Rong was silent for a long time before saying, women have to have a home after all. In that case, why don't I find a better home? With that, she looked at Yi Xian, you are gentle and elegant, handsome, and very strong. I think you are very good. What a sin. Yi Xian suddenly shook his head. He patted his face. It was really dangerous for a boy to go out, especially someone like him. It was too dangerous. If he wasn't careful, he would be targeted by a woman. Too scary. Yi Xian looked at Xiang Rong, go down. Xiang Rong glanced at Yi Xian and didn't dare to say anything more. She bowed slightly and then retreated. In the starry sky, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Pure? None of these women were pure. Just like Xiangrong, she had been waiting for a suitable opportunity to sell herself to others. But she didn't know that only by being excellent could she be worthy of a better man. Otherwise, if the gap between the two sides was too big, she would not have any weight in other people's hearts. The idea of relying on a rich man was not good. Yi Xian didn't care about this Xiang Rong. Qin Guan had already given her a chance. As for how she used it, that was her business. Thinking of this, Yi Xian smiled slightly. He had to say that he and Qin Guan had the same ideas. At this moment, a pretty woman suddenly appeared not far behind Yi Xian. She respectfully bowed. "Young Master Yi, Immortal Treasure Pavilion's President Xiao Lan requests an audience." Yi Xian frowned. "Immortal Treasure Pavilion's President? The Immortal Treasure Pavilion of Immortal Treasure Realm? The Immortal Treasure Pavilion of Immortal Realm?" Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Let him in." The delicate-looking woman bowed deeply. At that moment, her heart was in extreme shock. The president of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion was requesting an audience. Xiao Lan. Yi Xian might not know the status of the president of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion in the Immortal Treasure Realm, but he knew that if Xiao Lan stomped his foot, the entire Immortal Treasure Realm would be shaken. Someone with real power. In the Immortal Treasure Realm, he was like an emperor. Countless forces wanted to curry favor with him. And now, this president actually came to see Yi Xian. The pretty woman was a little confused. Obviously, Yi Xian was not just a simple super VIP. After the delicate and pretty woman left, a middle-aged man appeared behind Yi Xian. The middle-aged man was dressed in a luxurious brocade robe. When he stepped into the starry sky, the entire starry sky trembled slightly, but returned to normal in the blink of an eye. Ancient God. This was a genuine ancient God. Through Dedeabi, Yi Xian was able to sense Dedeabi's true realm. Xiao Lan looked at Yi Xian. Without any hesitation, he bowed slightly. "Greetings, young Master Yi." "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian turned to look at Xiao Lan and said with a smile, "This form of address of yours is a little interesting." Xiao Lan smiled and said, "It is my honor to meet the Yang clan." Yi Xian was curious. "Who?" Xiao Lan smiled faintly, "An elder." Yi Xian spread his hands. "Except me. Besides my father, my sister, and a few other aunts, I don't know anyone else in the Yang clan." He knew that this young Master Yi in front of him was being left to fend for himself. Yi Xian smiled. "Senior is an ancient god realm cultivator?" Xiao Lan smiled. "I don't deserve the title senior. Young Master Yi can call me Xiao Lan or President Xiao." Xiao Lan smiled faintly. "I don't deserve the title senior. Young Master Yi can call me Xiao Lan or President Xiao." He paused for a moment before continuing, "I am indeed an ancient god realm cultivator." Yi Xian was a little curious. "I heard there are ancient gods in the city?" Xiao Lan nodded. "There is one, an old monster from the Supreme Profound sect of the Supreme Profound world. He spends most of his time in the Immortal Treasure Realm." Yi Xian pondered for a moment before looking at Xiao Lan. "Is there something you need from me?" Xiao Lan smiled. "Nothing much, I just came to see young Master Yi. If young Master Yi needs anything in this world, please let me know." Yi Xian smiled. "Many thanks." Xiao Lan bowed slightly. "Young Master Yi is too polite. Then I won't disturb young Master Yi any longer. Farewell." With that said, Xiao Lan left quietly. At this time, Xiao Lan suddenly stopped. "Young Master Yi, is that Xingu clan patriarch Gu Han threatening young Master Yi? If so, does young Master Yi need me to deal with him now?" Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. "Forget it. I'll deal with this myself." Xiao Lan nodded. "Very well." He paused for a moment before asking, "Young Master Yi, are you here for the auction in 5 days?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Xiao Lan opened his palm and a dark golden invitation slowly floated in front of Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, this is the highest invitation. When you arrive, just show it to me. Yi Xian put away the invitation letter and said with a smile, "Thank you." Xiaolan smiled, "Young Master Yi is too polite." With that said, Xiaolan bowed slightly and left. After leaving, Xiaolan slowly walked to Gu Han's room and lightly knocked on the door. When the door opened, Gu Han appeared in front of Xiaolan. Xiaolan smiled, "Patriarch Gu Han, I am Xiaolan, the president of Celestial Treasure Pavilion." Xiaolan. Gu Han was stunned. She naturally knew who Xiaolan was. He was a terrifying figure in the celestial treasure world. Moreover, he was a genuine ancient god. At this time, Xiaolan opened his palm and a dark golden invitation slowly floated in front of Gu Han. "Patriarch Gu Han, this is the highest invitation. We welcome Patriarch Gu Han and young Master Yi to participate in the auction in 5 days." Hearing that, Gu Han was stunned. Xiaolan did not say anything else. He cupped his fists and turned to leave. Before coming here, he had investigated Gu Han and Yi Xian. He knew that Yi Xian was coerced by Gu Han, but now that he was here, he discovered that things were a little different from what he had imagined. When he asked Yi Xian if he wanted to deal with Gu Han, the truth was, he wanted to see Yi Xian's attitude. It was obvious that Yi Xian had no intention of killing Gu Han. This was a little interesting. Since Yi Xian had no intention of killing Gu Han, he naturally had to do things properly. What if Yi Xian and Gu Han were friends, or had some other relationship? Many a time, a small detail could determine one's success or failure. After Xiaolan left, Gu Han looked at the invitation in front of her in silence. This was the highest standard invitation from Celestial Treasure Pavilion, only people with special status could receive it. In general, those who received this invitation were mostly ancient god realm masters. But now, the president of Celestial Treasure Pavilion personally sent her an invitation. Moreover, his attitude was so respectful. After all, she was only a demigod, whereas Xiaolan was an ancient god realm master. Yi Xian. Gu Han turned to look at Yi Xian's room in the distance, deep in thought. In the starry sky, Yi Xian collected his thoughts, sitting cross-legged on the ground. Cultivate. Stabilize. He needed to stabilize his cultivation as soon as possible. Only after stabilizing the profound insight realm could he study the ancient god realm. His goal was the ancient god realm, not the demigod realm. Other than stabilizing his cultivation, he was also practicing his one-sword void cleaving. Now, he no longer relied on the sword his father gave him, but his own sword intent. He discovered that the sword formed from the world's sword intent was even more amazing. However, with his current soul, he could only condense several hundred of these swords in a short period of time. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. 3 days later, Yi Xian left his room. At the entrance of Celestial Treasure Pavilion, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the sky. Today, the sky was calm and tranquil. He did not cultivate all the time, choosing to strike a balance between work and rest. Cultivating day and night was really boring. Today, he planned to pay a visit to the Wuxia Academy. He was very curious about the Wuxia Academy established by Qin Guan. Yi Xian asked for the location of the Wuxia Academy and got up to leave. At this time, Gu Han suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Gu Han. "Patriarch, you?" Gu Han's expression was calm. "I'll go with you." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you know where I'm going?" Gu Han answered, "Wuxia Academy." Yi Xian was slightly surprised, then smiled. "Since you want to go, let's go together." He walked away after saying that. Gu Han glanced at Yi Xian, then followed. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly felt a little nervous. Gu Han looked at Yi Xian. "What's wrong?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm looking forward to it, but I'm afraid I'll be disappointed." Gu Han was puzzled. Disappointed about what? Yi Xian chuckled. I'm afraid that the academy is different from what I think it is." Gu Han was silent for a moment, then said, "Pavilion Master Qin is an extraordinary person." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Let's go." Soon, the two of them arrived at the foot of a mountain. The mountain was called Wuxia Mountain. It wasn't big, and at the entrance of the mountain, there was a very simple sign. On it, there were 4 words, Wuxia Academy. Yi Xian looked up and saw hundreds of thatched huts on the top of the mountain in the distance. There was not a single luxurious building. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned. "This is Wuxia Academy?" At this time, an old man walked from behind the two of them. This old man was wearing a very simple hemp robe and a pair of hemp shoes. He was also carrying a bundle of dry firewood on his back. When they saw this old man, Yi Xian and Gu Han's expressions changed. Ancient god. This ordinary-looking old man in front of them was actually an ancient god. At this time, the old man suddenly stopped. He looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "You must be the young Master Yi that the Pavilion Master mentioned." Yi Xian nodded. "That's right." The old man sized up Yi Xian and said with a smile, "You have an extraordinary bearing." As he spoke, his gaze fell on the pen at Yi Xian's waist. "Dedeabi?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man smiled, retracted his gaze, then said, "Young Master Yi, let's talk inside." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Senior, you are?" The old man smiled. "Wen Xiu, the current deputy dean of Wuxia Academy." Yi Xian was slightly stunned, then smiled. "To be honest, Wuxia Academy is different from what I expected." Wen Xiu smiled. "The Pavilion Master said that for young people, material things can easily confuse their minds. Moreover, everyone is here to learn, not to enjoy. Therefore, all students of Wuxia Academy have to do everything personally, even cooking and washing clothes. They have to do it themselves, including me, the dean." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "With your strength, washing clothes, and cooking," Wen Xiu shook his head, "in the academy, you can cultivate, but you can't use any of your strength to facilitate yourself." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Wen Xiu smiled. "How can I change the world if I don't eat the suffering of the common people?" Yi Xian was silent. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.